This guy thought he would be the best Demon King by following the rulebook of the ancient Demon Kings, but he still met the sad fate of dying at the hands of the same heroes whose growth he had fostered himself. He was clever though. His corpse did explode, and he evidently took out everyone who stood there mocking him, but that's besides the point. Deus regressed right back to the Demon King Military Academy on the day of his graduation, resolving to shatter the trash standards set by that pathetic institution and carve a path of such absolute carnage that no human would ever see him coming. Berger's rebellion did not come without backlash. The Archduke of the Demon Realm, Arcane Blarimph, screamed loudly at Berger. He told Berger that he might be executed on the spot for daring to insult the standards of the Demon King. However, considering his previously exemplary conduct and outstanding talent, the Archduke offered him one final chance. Berger stood handcuffed in the midst of everyone as the Archduke ordered him to withdraw his reckless statement immediately and apologize to the entire Demon Realm. If he refused, he would be assigned to a deployment in Arene. People began to gasp at the mention of Arene. They whispered among themselves, questioning if that was the dimension where Demon Kings went to die. Everyone agreed it was basically a death sentence. Some argued that a mere apology wouldn't be enough, claiming he deserved it for insulting the standards of the Demon King. The Archduke looked at Berger and reminded him that he knew exactly what Arene was, the worst domain where countless Demon Kings had lost their lives. Upon hearing this, Berger stood adamant and told them to send him there. Everyone gasped as Berger declared he would go to prove that the Demon King standards were garbage. The Archduke screamed that Berger was completely hopeless and announced that, effective immediately, his deployment location was Arene, and he began to sink downward. The Archduke informed him that he would receive none of the privileges normally granted to a top Demon King, and that no demons would accompany him until the occupation was complete, though he was forbidden from returning to the Demon Realm. As Berger fell through the portal, he descended heavily through the skies, and thought to himself that this outcome was expected after causing such a mess. Still, it dawned on him that he was truly being sent to Arene, a massive space where the heroes who had killed him in his previous life resided. Even before he regressed, he had personally chosen Arene, thinking that the strongest like him should conquer the hardest difficulty. That arrogance had cost him his life, as too many heroes had exploited the Demon King standards. In that moment, Berger landed heavily on the top of the icy mountains in the northern continent, the Urgist Mountains. He stood up and told himself that he would not let history repeat itself. This time, he would be the one to exploit the Demon King's standards and the hero's standards. A memory then played from back in the Demon Realm. Someone was shaving his beard and buttoning his clothes, looking very sharp. This was the top graduate of the Demon Academy, Gordon Dyrek. If the Demon King Academy trained Demon Kings, then the Demon Academy trained the demons who would serve them. Before the incident, a lady standing beside him had remarked on how lucky Gordon was to graduate as the top demon, noting he would be serving the top demon lord Berger. Gordon was excited to work with someone he looked up to, and recognized him as a prodigy of the demonic dragon lineage, a once-in-a-millennium talent who would be remembered in history forever. Gordon was extremely excited, picturing himself engraved on the glorious pages of history right beside our boy Berger. However, Berger's declaration that the standards were trash had shattered the future Gordon envisioned. Strangely, Gordon was still deployed to Arene with Berger. He dropped his suitcase to the ground, looking distraught and trying to process the sudden change in Berger's orientation. Behind him, he heard Berger's voice as he walked up and noted that they had sent a demon after all. Despite declaring that they wouldn't, Berger seemed excited to see Gordon. As Berger extended his hand to shake his, Gordon asked him why he would do such a thing. When Berger asked what he meant, Gordon began to scream about the standards and questioned why he would choose a place like Arene, fearing he was going to die. Berger told him to calm down, lest he rip his hair off. Gordon grew even angrier, shouting that his hair was not the issue. Berger glared at Gordon, wondering why he was acting like this. In the past, Gordon had been confident and composed, telling him they could do it together. Berger concluded that the situation was vastly different now, but he realized he could not tell Gordon about his regression, as he might think he was insane. He left Gordon to his tantrum. In an attempt to calm himself, Gordon told Berger that he would fulfill his duty regardless of the situation. The first rule of the Demon King standards stated that the Demon King must build a tower, but it could not be hidden or placed in an excessively harsh environment so that heroes would be able to find it. Gordon stated that the area was dangerous, surrounded by massive mountains and roaming monsters, making it difficult for humans to approach. Gordon told Berger they could not build a tower there and should move. Berger paid him no mind, placing a crystal on the ground and stating he would build the tower right there. He planted the tower seed into the snow, which was supposed to be fed with Demon King blood to grow. Gordon screamed that he was going directly against the standards and asked if he was throwing away the pride of a demon king. Berger simply stated that he never swore to follow any of those oaths. Berger understood the disgust he felt. As a demon, it was hard to deny a fate carved deep into your bones unless you experienced something as drastic as death. In that moment, Berger squeezed his nail into his palm until blood began to flow, dropping it onto the tower seed. He told Gordon to listen well. The Demon King standards were garbage, especially in Arrain. As Gordon watched, the tower caused the entire terrain to shake. The seed germinated instantly, causing a crimson glow to erupt in the space, encircling them. Berger smiled, noting that because Arrain was swarming with heroes, they needed to follow different rules to survive. The tower identified the user's race as the Black Flame Demonic Dragon Tribe, referring to Berger, and a massive construct erupted from the ground. It towered multiple stories high. Berger glared at it, and reasoned that this was why Demon Kings kept dying. Humans had realized after countless tower destructions that the tower had a mechanism that could be turned against them. He concluded that in this land, it should be called the Hero Standard, as it benefited the heroes more than the demons. Gordon, confused by the term Hero Standard, watched as the tower stood firm. Berger walked into the tower, telling Gordon to follow. Inside the first floor, the space was extremely massive. Gordon looked around, noting that a normal tower should be complex or filled with monsters, but there was nothing there. No perks. Concluding that it was a tower fit for a Demon King banned from privileges, they arrived at the 5th floor, the Demon King's chamber. Gordon thought to himself that since they could not undo building the tower, they must at least follow Rule 2. The Demon King must kidnap a prince or princess, preferably one close to the throne, as they yielded more demonic energy. Gordon advised Berger to kidnap the princess, with the highest succession rank from the Kingdom of Kazan. Berger agreed, shocking Gordon. Berger mentioned he already had a princess in mind. As he walked toward the window, Gordon offered to help, but Berger told him to guard the tower, as the Demon King's residence must not be empty. Gordon felt a sense of relief, thinking the top Demon King was just stressed. However, when Gordon asked who he planned to bring, Berger replied that he was choosing the 13th princess from the Kingdom of Hilderin, the nation farthest from the tower. Berger floated in front of the window where the princess sat, and he told her he had come to take her. Gordon began to scream, realizing this was the total opposite of the standards, and he grew extremely angry at the constant stress Berger was causing him. The moment Berger arrived at the princess's castle, she looked up at him and asked him who he was. Berger glared at her and informed her that he was the Demon King who had come to kidnap her. She smiled and asked if he was sure he could handle her. Berger was taken aback, wondering why she would ask such a strange question. He reasoned to himself that she must think Demon Kings are a joke, so he told her that he was indeed a Demon King, and that he was certainly capable of handling her. She smiled again, and extended her hand, willing to be taken. He asked what she was plotting, to which she replied that she had always thought something like this might happen one day, given she was born a princess. Berger warned her that if she was hoping he would let his guard down, she should give up, as he was quite desperate and would not let her trick him. She insisted she was not plotting anything, asking how she could possibly set up a trap for a Demon King, foreknowing he would arrive today. Berger reasoned that she had a point, but an uncomfortable feeling persisted. He asked if she was ready to go, and as she extended her hand, he picked her up, and they flew off. They arrived back at the Urgest Mountains and entered Berger's tower. As they landed, Gordon Direk walked up and noted that Berger had returned safely. Berger dusted the snow off himself and told Gordon to let the princess stay in the corner of the 4th floor. When Gordon asked if he should put her in the prison, Berger explained that since she had come along without much resistance, he was willing to offer a certain degree of leniency. Gordon acknowledged this and then informed Berger that he had something important to tell him. The princess arrived at the 4th floor, and as the princess sat on the cold, hard ground, she realized she had truly been kidnapped. She noted that there was nothing here compared to her usual life. No pillows, no blankets, no maids, and no pretty gardens. Despite the stark difference from the kingdom, she smiled, thinking to herself that it was not so bad. Meanwhile, Berger spoke with Gordon about an invitation he had received from the Tower of Beasts. Gordon explained that it was a welcome party for the new Demon King. Berger scoffed, dismissing the idea of a welcome party as a pathetic attempt to haze the new guy and throw Berger's weight around. He reasoned that Demon Kings were fundamentally too proud to join hands with anyone else. However, Arrain, an unprecedented factor, had forced the Demon Kings to join hands and work together. He concluded that while he had ignored them in the past, thinking them weak-minded, He should at least try to have some light exchanges with them this time. The scene cut to the Tower of Beasts, where a demon king looked angry. He introduced himself as Draxon, the demon king of beasts. In front of him stood Berger. Draxon, while chewing on a piece of meat, told Berger that he had been ruling over this region for 70 years, and demanded to know if Berger was the new demon king. He mocked Berger, saying he had heard he mocked the traditional ways, but that he seemed pretty unimpressive. Berger asked if he was there to pick a fight, telling him to state his business. Draxon laughed, telling Berger he knew nothing, and that the Archduke Arcane Blairymph had told him to watch over Berger once he arrived. Berger thought of the Archduke as a noisy old vampire, and reasoned that dropping him in Arene clearly had not been enough to cheer him up. Draxon was taken aback by Berger's lack of respect, asking if he dared address the Archduke in that manner. He dropped his meat heavily, screamed at Berger, and commanded him to lick it off the ground, promising to pardon his impudence if he did. Berger asked the Demon King of Beasts if he truly did not know why he was there. Draxon replied that he knew it was because Berger had mocked the orthodox ways of the Demon Kings. Berger stepped on the ground, causing a massive explosion to show his annoyance, and glared at Draxon, asking if he really thought he would follow that stupid rule about Demon Kings not killing each other. Draxon felt the weight of Berger's annoyance and wondered what kind of monster he was dealing with. Draxon then told Berger that the Archduke had instructed him to check if he had properly kidnapped a princess, and warned that if he did not report within a month, he would lose his authority. Before Draxon could continue, Berger turned and walked off with Gordon, stating that he had already kidnapped a princess. This shocked Draxon and his subordinates. As Berger left, he remarked that she suited his taste. Upon arriving back at his tower, Berger sat on his throne. Gordon praised him for excellently showing the majesty of a demon king. Berger told him it was nothing special, but he sensed that they needed to be prepared, so he instructed Gordon to check on the princess's condition. Alone in the throne room, Berger felt troubled. He reasoned that if this was the stance of the other demon kings, things would become quite bothersome. He realized the consequences of mocking the orthodox ways were greater than he had expected, but he concluded that even if given another chance, he would make the same choice again, as he would rather die than bow his head to what he considered trash. He decided to check his status. Since he'd kidnapped a princess of the lowest rank, he expected to only get a few hundred demonic energy points, as it was the safest for the meantime, but he was shocked to see 13,000 points. He was baffled as to why he had so many, just before receiving a notification that a video recording had been sent from the Tower of Beasts. He checked it, and in the recording, Draxon congratulated him, noting that his achievement in Arene was not an easy feat. Draxon admitted he was impressed, and Berger wondered if the mocking of the orthodox way was just a cover, which made him feel uneasy. Suddenly, Gordon ran back into the throne room, reporting that something was wrong with the 4th floor. They went to the 4th floor, where the space had transformed into a warm garden filled with butterflies and various creatures. Berger was bewildered to receive a notification that naturalization was in process, seemingly caused by the princess. He saw the princess sitting in the corner with spirits floating around her. Berger glared at her, realizing this feat could only be accomplished by someone who had mastered the 4 elements. He told her he had clearly gone to the 13th princess's castle and questioned if she was the 13th princess. The lady laughed, stating that Berger had mistaken her for Elena. Berger was stunned to learn she was not Elena, and she introduced herself as Ernan Hilderin, the first princess of the Hilderin kingdom. The scene shifted to the Hilderin kingdom, where the king was screaming loudly that his first princess had been abducted by a demon king. He demanded that the strongest heroes in the entire military be gathered instantly to behead the foolish demon king and bring back the princess. Ernan smiled at Berger and told him that was why she had asked earlier if he could handle her. Berger realized he had heard rumors of a genius elemental mage full of mana, and he was bewildered as to how she had managed to fool his detection. She explained that she could hide her mana using a ring, which was an heirloom passed down in the royal family, and she smiled, asking if that answered his question or if he wanted to send her back. Berger was speechless as he glared at her. He reasoned that he would be mocked if he sent the princess back, and since no kingdom would be scared of a coward, he concluded that it would only make it harder for him to collect demonic energy. He decided he had to stick this through. Just then, he received a notification that rage targeted toward the Demon King. It stated that his tower had been detected, and he felt a sense of dread as he wondered if they had singled him out. He told Ernan that nothing changed. She was still his hostage. The scene cut to the kingdom of Hilderin, where the king was screaming for his soldiers to kill the foolish Demon King and bring back his princess. An advisor spoke out, explaining that they did not yet know which Demon King was responsible, and that they had sent out patrols, so they needed to wait. The king screamed back, demanding that they hurry and figure it out, as they were doing nothing while the princess remained kidnapped. Another advisor noted that something was off, and when the king asked what he meant, the man explained that a demon king had recently kidnapped another nation's prince, bringing the rage of many upon himself before being killed by heroes. He questioned why another demon king would appear to kidnap their princess despite such an example, and other advisors began to resonate with his thoughts. The king, still in a state of desperate anger, concluded that it must be a new demon king. Someone arrived to inform them that they had found traces of teleporting magic heading north, with the destination assumed to be the Urgest Mountains, and the king became more enraged. Back at Berger's tower in the Urgest Mountains, Gordon Direct told Berger that the army from Hilderan would arrive soon, and questioned if it would be too much for them to handle. Berger smiled and told him it was fine, as the kingdom of Hilderan would not be able to reach them. He explained that the Urgest Mountains were at the very edge of the northern tip of the continent, while the kingdom of Hilderan was in the far south, and it was impossible for them to get the army through all the nations located in between. He deduced they would be forced to employ a hero guild instead. And almost on cue, the king of Hilderan told his people they had no choice but to contact a hero guild. The guild posted the mission request, and heroes began to murmur, wondering what crazy demon king would kidnap the princess of Hilderan, and noting that the destination was the Urgest Mountains, a place full of hellish monsters. Some heroes refused to do a job that would get them killed, while others remarked that the king of Hilderan was going to suffer from the bill for such a request. Berger smiled, noting that the hero guild would not budge, as those people only cared about money and would not want to go somewhere so dangerous. Gordon wondered how Berger knew so much about Aurene, thinking it was almost as though he had been there before. Much later, the Hilderan king screamed at his men that no hero wanted to step up for the job, as the heroes in Aurene were picky and cared more about profit than justice, and the price offered for the mission was not to their taste. Meanwhile, Berger sat on his throne and revealed all of the information he had gathered. He thought that the demonic energy he had was not enough to deal with a whole army of heroes, and he knew that fear all too well. He called Gordon and told him to contact Draxon, as he intended to sell demonic energy. When Berger relayed this, Gordon was shocked, screaming as he wondered how Berger could want to exchange the very currency of dreams that allowed demons to transcend their limits and unlock tower features for mere human money. Berger reasoned that although he could not stop the heroes with his current amount of demonic energy, he needed to obtain more power, and he concluded that human money would give him a way to control that power. The scene cut to Holton Walk, near the Urgest Mountains fortress city. A cloaked figure walked past the guards, who questioned what kind of insane mercenary would go to the Urgest Mountains alone. The man threw a gold coin at the guard and walked past, leaving the guards conversing on how to share the money, unaware that the Demon King had just walked right past them. Berger resolved to look for a guide, and he entered the Scarlet Hawk Mercenary Guild headquarters. Inside, the captain laughed off the news of a new Demon King setting up a tower on the Urgest Mountains, calling it fake news, and claiming that Demon Kings always set towers where heroes could easily reach them. When one of the men mentioned the kidnapping of the Hilderan princess, the captain remained skeptical, questioning if anyone had ever seen a Demon King go to the other end of the continent for such a purpose. After a heated debate on the current situation, the captain laughed at the fact that none of the heroes would even dare to go to these icy mountains without breaking the Hilderan Kingdom's bank. Berger, who had walked behind the guild leader, smiled and remarked that he saw what was up. The guild leader screamed in fright and questioned who Berger was, but upon Berger's command to have the rest of his men leave, the others dashed toward him with weapons. In an instant, Berger struck them in non-vital points to give a stern warning. Someone dared to swing a heavy hammer at Berger, but he suddenly grabbed the hammer tightly to stop the attack. Right on time, the archers mounted at the corner to attack as well, but they were in for it, as Berger instantly threw the man into them. While the guild leader looked on in terror, Berger grinned as he continued to beat all the members in the room. After the men were passed out on the ground, Berger walked up to the leader and promised to spare him if he answered a question. The man bowed and agreed, and Berger asked where the slave market was. They arrived at a massive castle, where Berger asked about the slaves. When the guild leader presented human slaves, Berger threw a sack of gold at him and asked for rare stuff. The man smiled and led him toward a different, underground space. Berger recalled Gordon's earlier words about buying slaves, and he affirmed that an elf, known for its integrity, would be the best choice to act as a spy to create chaos among the heroes. They stood in front of an elf with green hair. Finally, the scene shifted back to the Hilderan Kingdom, where the hero Hillian Cargill introduced himself to the king, promising to rescue the princess and bring back the Demon King's head in the name of justice. Berger stared at the elf, calculating that the species was known for its innocence and would be effective for his plans. A man walked into the space and asked what kind of slaves Berger was looking for. to which Berger replied that he was there to buy the elven slave and that the guild leader would pay for it. The guild leader screamed in shock at these words, but Berger glared at him and asked if he objected. The leader replied that he did not, brought out some gold, and gave it to the trader, noting it was only given that he had to pay. Berger walked off and asked them to leave the room so he could confirm something, and though they questioned if the elf might go berserk, Berger assured them it was fine, and that he would pay if anything happened, a statement that left the guild leader looking extremely displeased. Berger walked up to the elf, who was shackled in chains, and used his magic to untie him, commenting on how a noble elf had been reduced to a miserable slave. The elf breathed heavily, glared at Berger, and asked what business a demon could possibly have with him, to which Berger offered him a chance to get revenge on humans. While the elf found the offer tempting, he admitted he could not trust demons any more than humans. Berger insisted he was different and guaranteed safety and freedom if the elf stayed loyal for exactly 50 years, arguing that 50 years was not long for an elf, and was better than being humiliated by humans. The elf countered that Berger's kind was trying to destroy the world tree and the world it sustained, asking how he could possibly trust a demon. The elf's words had hit Berger hard, and so he smiled and vowed on the Demon King's standard to fulfill his promise and not lay a hand on the world tree. Realizing the Demon King's standard was as vital to a demon as the world tree was to an elf, the elf listened as Berger released the shackles and asked him to vow on the world tree to pledge allegiance for the next 50 years. The elf smiled, noting Berger was a strange one, and introduced himself as Granada. Granada explained he would make his vow only after seeing the Demon King who sent Berger, but Berger responded calmly that he was the Demon King himself. Granada was shocked, laughed, and shook Berger frantically, asking why a Demon King would come in person, as they grew weaker the further they were from their towers. He challenged Berger, saying if he really was the Demon King, he would pledge his allegiance for 100 years instead. Back on the 5th floor of the throne room in Berger's tower, Berger laughed and accepted the 100-year contract. Granada was annoyed, calling it a scam, and complaining that the tower was empty, had no monsters, and that at this rate, the heroes would tear them apart. Berger angrily released his demonic energy, and the crushing pressure left Granada realizing that this really was a Demon King. He pondered on their journey to the tower here, and Granada realized that no disaster-level monsters in the Urgest Mountains had dared to attack them, and he bent the knee, vowing his loyalty for the next 100 years on the great name of the World Tree. Granada hoped that as part of an evil plan, he would be assigned an important role for his vengeance, but Berger simply told him to prepare a meal, which surprised Granada, who had expected an important plan, and he began cooking alongside Ernan Hilderin, who offered to help make vegetable bread. When the meal was ready, they gathered in the dining room for dinner. During dinner, Granada turned to Berger and asked if the woman was indeed the princess of the Hilderin kingdom. Berger confirmed she was Ernan Hilderin, and Granada was shocked, wondering how Berger planned on stopping the heroes. Berger told him that was why he had brought him along. Later, Berger told Granada he would be disrupting the human world as a spy, but first, he needed to test his skills. When Granada questioned how he could beat a Demon King, Berger promised to use only one hand, no demonic energy, and to reduce their contract by 50 years if Granada won. Upon hearing those words, he immediately took a fighting stance. Granada dashed forward, and they began to duel heavily, but Granada was determined, using elemental magic and a binding spell to hook Berger's feet, seeing an opening to win his freedom. But just then, Berger smiled, morphed into his demonic form to control his strength, and delivered a heavy strike that echoed outside the tower. Later, Berger visited the Red Hawk Mercenary Guild headquarters at Holton Walk, and the captain greeted him enthusiastically, but Berger shrugged him off, and offered to hire them for a year. When the men behind the captain grumbled about sucking up to someone who had beaten them, Berger dropped a sack of gold, which instantly changed their minds, and they vowed to follow their captain forever. Berger introduced Granada as the man who would relay his orders. When Granada walked in, bruised and injured, the mercenaries recognized the same injuries they bore from Berger's hand, resonating on their shared kinship of Berger's cruel beating, and immediately welcomed Granada into the team with solidarity. Berger noted that while they looked mediocre, they were seasoned mercenaries. He warned them that the only hero who would answer the Hilderin Kingdom's call was Hillen Cargill, and he commanded the Red Hawk mercenaries to investigate this hero as their first mission. And they instantly affirmed these orders. Back at the Burge Tower, Berger spoke to his gathered men, explaining that since he had left the hero matter to Granada, it was his turn to focus on becoming stronger. Demonic energy points could be used to enhance the tower, or the Demon King himself. The only way for Berger, who had sold all his points to gain strength, to increase his power further, was the Spirit Blossom. It was a crystal of mana that sprouted after absorbing the mana of nature, and once consumed, it granted an immense boost in strength. Here in the Urgest Mountains, with the harsh mana storms and powerful monsters, nature remained nearly untouched by humanity. Consequently, the spirit blossoms had spent long years naturally absorbing the mana of nature, meaning their energy had become even more refined. Berger realized that while they were not as effective for demons as concentrated demonic energy, they were better than nothing. He told Gordon that he was going to find some spirit blossoms. Gordon warned that it was risky to go without prior preparations, noting that it was akin to finding a needle in a desert and that monsters were no different from demons, as they would attack the moment they saw an opening. Berger responded that he could deal with the monsters easily, but finding the blossoms would indeed be difficult. Gordon noted that the task would be impossible unless Berger had an excellent mana detector. Suddenly, there was a heavy knock on the door, and Ernan entered, looking shy and asking if they were busy, though her sudden entrance gave Berger an interesting idea. Much later, Berger and Ernan were outside. Ernan seemed extremely excited, her spirits moving around with her as she expressed her boredom and reminded Berger of his promise to let her decorate the 4th floor. Berger agreed, provided she could help find the spirit blossoms. Berger thought to himself that her willingness to decorate a Demon King's tower was already crazy, but he shrugged it off. Ernan thought to herself that she had not expected to be able to leave the tower and was glad she had asked for permission. She suddenly noticed Berger's hand on her shoulder. Before she could realize what was happening, he asked her to hold on tight. Berger grabbed her and took flight into the air. She was initially shy because of the great height and closed her eyes, but when she opened them, she was amazed. It had been dark on the day she was kidnapped, so she had not seen the world from the sky. It was just so vast. Glaring at the mountain range, she thought about how her life had once been a cycle of magic training, studying, and rulership, a routine she had expected to continue until she died. Now her life felt much more colorful. She told Berger that she was likely the only person who had ever flown over the Urgest Mountains. Berger, addressing her as Princess, replied that he did not care, but Ernan cut him short, telling him to call her Ernan instead, as they would be seeing each other for some time. Berger was taken aback by her directness, wondering if he had let her take things her way too much. He grabbed her hand, holding her suspended in the air, and warned her that she was forgetting her place, and asked if she wanted to move to the underground prison. Ernan apologized, and Berger ordered her to use her spirits to find the spirit blossom. Her spirits dashed off instantly, and Berger realized that while they might not find it quickly, they would certainly be faster than Gordon or himself. To his surprise, she found them instantly, and she escorted him to a space where the flowers were grown. Many beasts were gathered in that same space. Berger told Ernan that it appeared they had guests who arrived before them. He addressed the monsters, explaining that they were descendants of demons who had left the demon realm, and ordered them to obey the Demon King, not touch the spirit blossoms, and leave the place. The monsters screamed in response, refusing to listen to a demon's words and threatening to kill him. Berger laughed and realized Gordon was right, noting how foolish he was to expect beasts to think. Our boy released a huge amount of demonic energy, warning them that he would burn them all to ashes. The monsters prepared to attack, screaming that they would protect their kind and kill Berger. Berger released a massive blast of demonic energy that caused an explosion, instantly engulfing the entire space. The monsters were incinerated, and when survivors tried to strike at the weak point, Berger pulverized them instantly. Ernan was surprised, noting that pole orcs were known to take down ogres if they worked together, yet they could not even get near them. Watching Berger stand in one position and lay waste to all the Pule orcs surrounding them, she realized the true power of the Demon King. After some time, the massacre was complete. Ernan bent over to examine the pure mana of the flower they had come to collect. Berger told her not to convert or steal it, and she agreed. He picked one up and told her that if she found more, she could have one, which excited her greatly. Berger realized that humans only cheered up when given a carrot. Unfortunately, they never found a second patch of blossoms in the mountain range, even though Ernan tried until she was exhausted. They returned to the Berge Tower. Inside, Berger was pleased that he had secured what he wanted, thinking that Ernan Hilderin might be more useful than he had initially thought. Gordon then informed him that he had received contact from Granada. Berger was surprised at how quick it was. Gordon reported that the hero Hillen Cargill and 32 other heroes had departed the capital of Hilderin, but they were not headed straight toward the Urgest Mountains. They were following the classic path of a hero, forming a party and growing through village quests. Gordon presented plans for the hero's journey, which Berger dismissed as trash. Berger explained that half-baked interruptions only made heroes stronger, and he ordered Gordon to tell Granada to join the hero's journey with the mercenaries, help them, and build their trust. Gordon was confused by this departure from the standard, expressing that they cannot stop the heroes with the current level of their tower, but Berger explained that he would reinforce the tower with a dwarf. Gordon was shocked and baffled at the idea of a dwarf, a human, and a high elf residing in the tower, worrying it would become a laughingstock. Berger silenced him with a surge of demonic energy. He explained that he needed a dwarf for magical tools, imagining the look on the heroes' faces when they opened the door to the first floor expecting weak monsters but were greeted by dozens of cannons. Gordon was shocked, but Berger paid him no mind, leaving the throne room to execute his plan. He flew off toward the dwarven underground city of Wolfner, where the best blacksmith, Lager Friedrich, was busy hammering away in his smithy, unaware that he was now scheduled to be kidnapped by a rogue demon king. And the mere thought of yet another abduction literally sent Gordon into a frenzy. Berger arrived at the dwarven city gates, observing the guards as they joked and chatted. He had encountered countless dwarves before regressing, but this was his first time visiting their city. He made his way to an inn called the Midnight Inn, where he placed coins on the table and asked the man in charge where he could find the most outstanding blacksmith in the country. The man smiled at the gold, acknowledging that dwarves loved money as much as heroes did, and directed Berger to the city of Cod, where he would find a huge hole inside the city limits. The dwarf had explained that a lift would require an ID check for a two-step security method to reach the desired floor. Berger, however, wasted no time, and jumped all the way down to avoid the security checkpoint. As a boss, he landed without stress, following the instructions to head to the lowest floor and the deepest room. Upon opening the door to the deepest chamber, he found the city's best blacksmith, Lager Friedrich, hammering away at his forge with intense passion. Watching the movement, Berger thought that the display of metallurgy made the mana appear to dance, and he wondered if this was truly the best blacksmith. Berger walked toward Lager, thinking he would quietly abduct him. However, Berger released a small amount of demonic energy, which Lager immediately sensed. Lager struck the metal in a different pattern, causing fire to engulf the space, which became uncomfortable for Berger. Berger realized that for the dwarf to sense such a tiny bit of energy was incredible, and he questioned if this dwarf could possibly be a hero. Suddenly, Lager jumped with his hammer to attack. Berger stopped the hammer with his arm before it could impact, grabbing it tightly and asking if Lager was a hero. Lager confirmed that he was Lager Friedrich, the blacksmith who contained the power of the heroes, and demanded to know how a demon dared to enter the land of the dwarves, threatening that Berger would not leave alive. Berger smiled and told him that he was actually a demon king. In one fluid motion, Berger disarmed Lager and held him in a vulnerable position. As Lager coughed, his hammer fell to the ground with a loud clang, prompting soldiers outside to dash into the smithy. By the time they arrived, Berger had already carried Lager away, leaving behind an empty room. The soldiers sounded the alarm, declaring that an intruder had abducted Lager, and ordering all exits to be blocked. Outside the smithy, Berger looked around at the rising chaos and told Lager that he would kill him instantly if he made a sound. When Lager asked why a demon king was there and if he had come for the princess, Berger dismissed the notion of being interested in princesses. Lager accused him of lying, but Berger asked about the secret underground passages that dwarven blacksmiths were rumored to dig for emergencies. Lager, feeling uncomfortable, realized the Demon King's presence confirmed his own fears. He had been living a quiet life precisely because he was too terrified to fight someone of that caliber. Simply because he and everyone in the dwarven estate knew very well that Lager was actually extremely weak. Berger told him that since he would not talk easily, he would kidnap the princess and let Lager go. Annoyed, Lager wondered how it would play out if he sold the princess out to save his own life. He screamed at Berger, calling him a vile creature, and lamenting that everyone already knew he was a weak hero, fearing that if such a rumor spread, he would be tortured for the rest of his life. Berger offered to guarantee his safety if he helped, vowing on the Demon King's standard. Lager recognized that standard as the fate all Demon Kings worshipped, realizing there was no way the demon would break such a vow. He resolved to lead Berger to the underground passage. Berger watched the dwarf's strange, uncomfortable smile, and felt a wave of disgust. Later, knights swarmed Lager's empty workshop. A young knight with pink hair, who was actually the princess of the dwarven kingdom, Louise Werft, was furious that her weapon was not being made. When a guard explained that they believed the blacksmith had been kidnapped, Louise screamed at him to shut his mouth, arguing that a hero could not possibly be kidnapped. The guard tried to explain that Lager was primarily a blacksmith and not skilled at fighting, but the princess ordered them to find the kidnapper immediately, threatening to pull their heads off if they failed. Meanwhile, Lager led Berger through the narrow, secret passage. Berger complained about having to watch Lager's disgusting backside, but Lodger insisted it could not be helped as they were almost there. They emerged at a mountain site near the gates of the Dwarven city. Lodger told Berger their deal was done and that he was leaving. Berger ignored him, prompting Lodger to remind him of the vow on the Demon King's standards. Berger dismissed the standard as garbage he did not care about. Shocked, Lodger realized the kind of Demon King he was dealing with. Berger approached him and asked what he should do with him. Lodger, fearing for his life, bowed down and promised he was useful, offering to craft any weapon Berger desired and even serve as a spy. Berger agreed to grant him mercy in exchange for an oath of allegiance, which Lodger accepted with exaggerated gratitude, all while secretly planning to betray the Demon King the moment he had the chance. Upon arriving at the Burge Tower, they reached the 4th floor. Gordon complained loudly about Berger bringing a hero dwarf. Berger told them to be silent. Ernan walked up to the dwarf, teasingly asking if he had come to save her. But Lodger was too stunned by the tower's appearance to respond. When Lodger asked why he was still there after being promised freedom, Berger reminded him that he had never actually promised him release, only mercy. Berger then revealed that he had knocked the dwarf out during the transport to ensure his compliance. Lodger began to laugh frantically at the absurdity of the situation, and when Berger asked if he was happy to be a subordinate, Lodger tearfully agreed. Berger assigned him his first mission, to install dozens of cannons on the 1st floor to destroy any heroes who dared to enter. Granada spoke through his communication device from the Hero's Journey Preparation Station, reporting a rumor that the new Demon King could utilize black flames, which had prompted the heroes to adopt fire-resistant equipment. He informed Berger that the heroes believed the Demon King was currently too fearful to deploy demonic beasts. Berger responded that the heroes still possessed their killing intent, but he noted that since they would be unable to obtain honor or wealth from the journey, they would eventually lose interest and fail to grow. Berger characterized the situation as a battle against time and commanded Granada to continue monitoring them. Granada, reflecting on the interaction, mused that the Demon King was remarkably knowledgeable about human nature and felt relieved that he was not his enemy. Back at the tower, Berger turned his attention to Lodger, placing a restriction that mana stones could not be used during the remodeling of the 1st floor. Lodger protested that a trap without mana stones would be ineffective, but Berger didn't budge on the decision, as the heroes possessed outstanding energy sensing abilities granted by the Dimension's favor, and would detect such traps before they could activate. Lodger tried to protest, but when Berger angrily threatened to find another blacksmith if his chosen expert could not solve the problem, Lodger hurriedly proposed a solution. Lodger explained that he had invented a magical tool capable of hiding mana traces, though it typically took 3 years to create. However, he had one finished unit in his workshop. Skeptical of this excuse, Berger placed a shackle around Lodger's neck, explaining that it was a magical tool capable of separating the dwarf's head from his body, which he could activate with one hand. He further provided a mask that could obscure the wearer's face, warning that removing it would be considered an escape attempt. Terrified, Lodger vowed never to take it off. Over the following month, Berger gathered necessary materials from various kingdoms, before returning to Wolfner via Lodger's secret tunnel. Inside Wolfner, Princess Louise Werft screamed at her knights, furious that they had failed to find the missing blacksmith after a month and a half. She warned them that they had 2 weeks to find the kidnapper, or they would face death, even grabbing one of them by the head and threatening his life if they failed. After the knights scrambled away to seal the tunnels, she stood there in the room, heavily annoyed. The princess lamented that she would not be able to obtain the weapon Lodger was creating, doing to the weapon what she planned to do to Lodger if he didn't return. Suddenly, the hidden tunnel entrance opened behind her, and Lodger emerged wearing his face-concealing mask. Recognizing the secret tunnel, the princess confronted the figure, noting that that was Lodger's secret tunnel that only he knows about, and realized it was Lodger. She laughed, intending to punish him for running away and force him to serve as her slave for the rest of his life. She stepped forward and curled her fist to strike him, declaring to him that from now on he would serve as nothing but her slave, and she would start by punishing him for running away. But a surge of demonic energy erupted from the tunnel, thrusting her backward. Berger stepped into the room, and while he ordered Lodger to retrieve his equipment, the princess demanded to know who he was and why he was aiding the dwarf. When Berger declared he was the master of the blacksmith she had been extorting, the princess attacked him. She jumps and dashes towards him, declaring that he is her slave and he is going to make weapons for her forever. Berger takes his stance as they begin to trade heavy blows. Berger glares at her and takes an opportunity to kick her right in the head, but she is able to catch his hand before it can do any fatal damage. Steadying her fist, she delivers a massive punch that sends him flying through the space. She began to laugh, telling him that it was over. As she turned her eyes towards Lodger, saying that it was his turn, Berger jumped right back at her and grabbed her by the hair before she could say another word. They began to trade multiple blows around the smithy, and neither was ready to back down. Just then, as Lodger glared at Louise, he deduced that, while Louise was not a hero, she was exceptionally strong and stood among the strongest fighters he had encountered prior to his regression. Berger deduced that he could kill her before she grew stronger, but he hesitated, fearing that using his full strength would reveal his identity as the Demon King and potentially lead to his capture by her soldiers. Meanwhile, Lodger struggled to dismantle the massive mana-hiding equipment. Under pressure from Berger to finish within a minute, Lodger worked frantically while the combatants continued to clash throughout the space. Eventually, Berger stepped closer to Lodger and told him that he needed to hurry up. Lodger asked for more time, explaining that he was still in the process of dismantling the entire structure. Berger questioned Lodger if he wanted to die and ordered him to finish the task within a minute. Panicked, Lodger promised that he would work as fast as he could. Just then, Louise dashed toward Berger and demanded to know who had given him permission to do that. Berger screamed at Lodger, warning him that if push came to shove, he would be left behind. Berger glared at Louise as he thought to himself that he had no idea how long he would be able to last without his real strength and his demonic energy. Despite this, he tried his best and continued to battle her head-on in that moment. Louise screamed that she did not know where he had come from, but he would not leave the place alive. She declared that she was going to break Lodger's legs, ensuring that he would not be able to escape. Berger told her that she sounded just like a Demon King, adding that she should give it up because he was taking the blacksmith and the equipment. At that moment, the equipment suddenly loosened, just as Lodger had predicted. Lodger declared to Berger that he had successfully dismantled it. As this happened, Louise began to scream and curse at Lodger. She realized that he had returned just to collect the machine, and she asked him if he honestly thought he would be able to get out of there easily. In that moment of frustration, Berger realized that he saw an opening. He seized the opportunity to kick her right in the guts, causing her to fly through the entire space until she struck the back wall. Our boy, truly efficient. Berger then used his subspace pocket to fit the entire machine inside. In a split second, when Louise finally pulled herself out of the dirt, she screamed that his attack was useless against her. However, she saw that the entire equipment that had been there just moments ago was gone, and she had no idea where it had gone. Just then, men from behind her began to scream as they dashed inside the smithy, calling out for the princess. The princess was angry at them, calling them slowpokes and asking if they intended to arrive only after she was already dead. She screamed that Lodger had run away and ordered them to chase him through the tunnel. But just then, the entire smithy began to blow up right in front of them, as she realized that it seemed as though he had blocked the tunnel. She began to wonder if he really did not want to make a weapon for her that badly, to the point where he would destroy his own smithy. This realization caused her to smile as she thought to herself that Berger was very interesting. She declared that she would personally search for him, even if she had to scour the entire continent. Berger, Lodger, and the others arrived back at the Berger Tower and dropped the massive construct onto the ground on the first floor. Gordon and Ernan stared at the enormous machine, bewildered by its size and sudden appearance. Berger explained that it was a necessary magical tool to stop the heroes, and Lodger announced that the installation of Mana's Phantom was complete. Berger commended the speed of the work and asked if the device could be activated immediately. Lodger attempted to power it up, and the machine began to swirl with energy, emitting a light so bright that it pushed a wave of air across the space. A notification then appeared before Berger, stating that the tower recognized Mana's Phantom and required 10,000 points to synchronize. Berger realized the tower possessed such a function, and, after confirming the synchronization, his points dropped from over 11,000 to just over 1,000. The system notified him that Mana's Phantom recognized Demon King Berger as its master, and the energy output shifted from standard mana to demonic energy. Lodger, astonished, remarked that he had never imagined such a merger and called it the discovery of the century, admitting that even as the creator, he did not know such a conversion was possible. Berger tested the device by asking Ernan to use any spell she wished. Though Ernan hesitated, fearing it would ruin the cleanliness of the floor, she cast a powerful spirit spell. Berger walked outside the tower, reasoning that a spell of that caliber should be detectable to anyone nearby, yet he felt absolutely no presence. He realized this was the power of a tower synchronized with Mana's Phantom, and when he touched the exterior, the entire tower vanished in an instant. He discovered he could hide or call forth the tower at will, using demonic energy, though it was a taxing ability he planned to utilize in the future. Lodger begged to examine the tower and the device, claiming he had never seen anything like this in history. Berger agreed, promising to allow it if Lodger's traps on the first floor successfully wiped out the heroes. Lodger, eager and excited, swore to sweep the crafty heroes away. Logger was very eager to start building. Berger then proposed a plan to Ernan, telling her that she would face the heroes on the 4th floor. Ernan was surprised, questioning her role as a princess. But Berger reminded her that she was also a genius spiritualist who wished to avoid returning to her royal palace. Our boy Berger recognized that assigning this role to an innocent princess who did not understand the ways of the world might be harsh. But he noted that she was already contemplating how to fight. Ernan asked what she should fight with, and Berger instructed her to simply fluster the heroes and reveal herself as an enemy. She agreed to look for an opening, but stipulated that she would not be introduced as a princess, only as the Demon King's subordinate. Berger readily agreed to this request, which pleased Ernan, though her suggestion of using her looks to seduce the heroes made Berger uncomfortable, and he quickly told her to stick to the plan. Later, in the throne room, Berger reviewed his preparations with Gordon. He had 60 mana cannons installed on the 1st floor and positioned Ernan on the 4th floor, but he remained concerned that he still lacked the strength to cut down all 200 of the incoming heroes. He examined a hyacinth flower he had acquired, which contained ice and water elemental particles but was contaminated by demonic energy, and wondered if he should consume it to grow stronger. The scene then cuts to outside of the tower. While searching for more of these spirit blossoms with Ernan, they were approached by a group of orcs. Berger prepared to defend himself, but the leader, Krutu, the chieftain of the Blue Frost tribe, knelt and asked to be accepted as the Demon King's kin, and the entire tribe echoed this sentiment in unison. Berger questioned this plea, but Krutu stated that their ancestors were demons who betrayed the demon realm. Since they bore that original sin, he pleaded that Berger grant them the honor of serving under him. Berger challenged Krutu, stating that the orcs only sought to become stronger, which Krutu admitted was true. Krutu's men then presented the spirit blossoms they had been collecting, which explained why Berger had been unable to find any. Berger was also taken aback by their fluent speech, to which Krutu explained that to survive in these harsh lands, his tribe valued wisdom more than strength, causing Berger to question if his tribe came looking for him simply because they lacked strength. Impressed by the tribe's wisdom and negotiating skill, Berger accepted Krutu as his kin, and embedded the Demon King's crest upon him, promising that his tribe would be eternal. With all pieces in place, the cannons on the 1st floor, Ernan on the 4th, and the orcs in the Urgus Mountains, Berger prepared for the heroes, determined to repay them for the humiliations of his previous life. The story shifted to the forest, where the hero Helen, Cargill, and Granada finally arrived at the edge of the Urgus Mountains, ready to begin their assault. The scene opened at the Halton Walk Heroes' Journey Preparation Station, where a festive atmosphere filled the space with murmurs and noise. Helion Cargill spoke to the Fortress Master, expressing his gratitude for the wonderful banquet, to which the Fortress Master replied that Helion was being flattering, and that he was glad to share a page of history with him. The Fortress Master then insisted that Helion deliver a speech to the crowd, noting that it would help raise morale. Helion rose to the task, clearing his throat as he addressed the assembly of heroes, nobles, knights, wizards, mercenaries, and merchants. He declared that the long-awaited hero's journey had reached its final stretch, suggesting that the Demon King might be spooked by the march of those who answered the call of justice, which could explain the absence of demonic monsters. After the crowd laughed, Helion cautioned them not to let their guard down, reminding them that their preparations were complete and that the following day they would make the Demon King pay for daring to kidnap the kingdom's princess, Ernan. He shouted to the assembly, asking who they were and who the master of the world was, encouraging them to remind the Demon King of these facts. The crowd roared in response, affirming that they were fighting for justice, and returned to their food and drink in high spirits. Granada watched them, thinking to himself that the number of heroes had not increased as the Demon King expected, though he noted they had not decreased either. He acknowledged that Helen's own popularity had brought the journey this far, having secured support from merchant groups and managed the nerves of wavering mercenaries. Observing the empty tower in his mind, he briefly considered the possibility of disaster, but he quickly realized that the subjugation succeeding was actually good for him, since he would be freed. He dismissed the thought and excused himself from the banquet for some fresh air. Outside, Granada stood in a corner, speaking via a communication device with Berger. Granada informed him that they had arrived at Halton and would climb the mountain the following day. Berger responded that once they left the city, Granada should cease all contact. He issued several warnings, telling Granada to watch the snow during the climb, not to lower his guard at night, and to stand far from the tower when they finally opened it. Before Granada could process these instructions, Helion appeared behind him, startling him. Helion offered Granada a glass of fruit wine, and the two began to discuss their nerves regarding the upcoming battle against the Demon King. Helion admitted that he was also uncertain, noting that subjugating a Demon King's tower was always a hellish endeavor. When Granada mentioned Helion's previous victory over the Demon King of Lust, Helion attributed the success to his brave comrades, specifically praising Granada for his role on the front lines. He then escorted Granada back to the banquet. As they walked, Helion looked at Granada's back, internally reaffirming his intention to use his comrades to ensure his own survival. The next morning, the March of the Heroes began, with the group chanting slogans of encouragement as they departed for the Urgest Mountain Gorge. As they trekked through the terrain, the mood remained light, with many soldiers noting that the mountain was not as difficult as anticipated and that the weather was clear. Their confidence was shattered when a drop of slime landed on a soldier, who looked up to see dozens of massive ghouls perched on the cliffs above. Helion immediately ordered the formation into battle, commanding them not to panic and to protect their comrades. As the ghouls swarmed the terrain, a massive frost giant appeared at the front of the pack. Helion commanded the others to retreat while he dealt with the giant alone. Helion then leaped up in an instant in front of the frost giant. Before the frost giant could even trace his steps, Helion smiled and stated that a frost giant could not possibly be stronger than the Demon King of Lost. In an instant, the frost giant extended its hand to stop Helion's movement in the air, but he was able to dodge and landed on the frost giant's hand in an instant. Helion began to dash upwards on the frost giant's hand as he began to embed his energy into his sword. Helion then reasoned to himself that it was time, and as he glared at the frost giant, he went on a rampage and dealt multiple strikes at the frost giant, landing gracefully onto the ground after taking out the creature. Helion screamed at them to run immediately. Everyone began to flee, rushing out of the tavern as the magicians stepped forward to provide cover, casting their spells to hold back the ghouls that were closing in from behind. The frost giant roared loudly, its massive frame trembling before it finally fell limp to the ground, defeated by Helion's devastating attacks. Surprisingly, the sheer force of the encounter did not stop them, and every one of them was able to escape the scene safely. The heroes managed to escape the gorge, though they remained shaken by the intensity of the encounter, with many attributing their survival to Helion's power. As the survivors gathered, Granada watched Helion, feeling a growing sense of trust in his potential to defeat the Demon King. Suddenly, a loud trumpet blast from the distance drew everyone's attention to a group of pure orcs, identified as the Demon King's subordinates by the demonic energy they radiated. Helion dismissed them as easy opponents, but Granada, recalling Berger's earlier warning about the snow, looked up toward the mountain peaks. He realized the warning had been literal, and just as he shouted a warning, a massive avalanche descended from the mountain, sweeping across the entire space. As the heroes ran helter-skelter to escape the wall of snow, Berger observed the scene, feeling excited, and mentally welcomed the heroes, promising to hunt them down in a truly dramatic fashion. Berger sat upon his throne, reflecting on the 3 warnings he had issued to Granada regarding the ascent. The first was the snow. The pale orcs had triggered an avalanche, sweeping away many of the heroes and leaving their numbers unaccounted for. Helion called out to Granada and the remaining men, ordering them to camp and search for those lost in the snow. Berger mused that the second warning had been not to lower their guard at night, as he had instructed the pale orcs to drive frost giants and ghouls toward the camp. As the monsters descended upon the abyss where the heroes were stationed, Berger found the endless repetition of these trials exhilarating, knowing the party would eventually be worn down. 3 days after entering the Urgest Mountains, the head count of the party fell from 511 to 256. Helion, along with Granada and several other knights, continued the trek. As they pushed forward, the party of heroes finally reached the summit of the tallest mountain. Upon their arrival, they began to wonder if the Demon King's castle tower was not located there. Helion began to scream loudly, asking if it was not common sense for a tower to be in a place easy for heroes to spot, and why it was not there. Just then, one of the men behind him said that they were going to give up. The words were shocking to Helion. He turned to the man and called his name, Sir Wharton, asking what he was saying. Wharton replied that the hero's journey was a failure, and that he was sorry, but their lives mattered more. Upon hearing those words, Helion could see that the spirits of the men behind Wharton were very low, which made him feel a bit angry. 6 days after entering the Urgest Mountains, they finally arrived at a position where they spotted the Demon King's tower. They were annoyed to find it positioned in a basin, and at this point, their head count had already reduced from 256 men to 52. They had suffered heavy losses by the time they arrived at the tower. They opened the castle doors and screamed out loud for everyone to wipe them all out. Glaring inside, they were very shocked by the third thing that Berger had prepared for them. In that moment, heavy cannons began to light up as the heroes stood in front of them. The cannons were about to be fired, and Helion was shocked at the sight of what he saw before him. A massive attack erupted from the tower entrance, striking all the heroes who stood directly in front of it and obliterating them in an instant with the Dwarf Manor cannon. At that point, their numbers dropped from 52 to just 1. Our boy was extremely excited by this, thinking to himself that even that level of force was not enough to bring Hylian Cargill down. Hylian, the sole survivor, walked forward, questioning the nature of the Demon King. As nothing about the situation followed conventional expectations, he spotted Granada in the corner and called out to him. Granada responded that he had barely avoided the attack and was alive. Hylian insisted they proceed to the next floor, and despite Granada's hesitation at tackling the tower with only 2 people, Hylian boasted that he had killed the Demon King of Lust and absorbed his powers, declaring a new Demon King no match for him. They reached the 2nd and 3rd floors, finding them completely empty, which confused them. When they arrived at the 4th floor, they were shocked to find a magical forest terrain. Ernan walked into the space, identifying herself as the Dark Spiritualist and one of the 4 heavenly kings protecting the Demon King. Hylian recognized the princess and was bewildered by her transformation. Ernan began to use the 4 elements in unison, a display of the highest-ranked spirit magic only a priestess like her could perform. Hylian knew that such a feat could only be performed by a spiritualist in their right mind, which made it all the more shocking. Overwhelmed by the string of ambushes, the hidden tower, the mana cannons, and now a crazed priestess, Hylian laughed, verging on madness, and declared that he would destroy everything. He swung his weapon wildly, but this was a trap. Berger arrived instantly behind Hylian and unleashed a massive attack of dark magic that echoed through the chamber. Berger stood triumphant, finally seeing the hero's face. Hylian, though driven to the ground, struggled to stand and accused Berger of sneaking up on him like a coward, and he decided to execute his final trump card. He began to search for Granada everywhere until he found him behind Berger. Seeking more strength, Hylian dashed toward Granada, who was hiding in the corner, and grabbed him by the shoulder. Using a ring on his finger, he began to drain Granada's energy, explaining that it was a forbidden artifact called the Elf Eater, which converted an elf's infinite vitality into mana. Granada fell limp as his life force was drained, and Hylian, now rejuvenated, stepped on Granada's head to walk past him, callously dismissing the death as being for the greater good. Berger laughed, mocking Hylian's vileness and questioning if the hero would be weak again if the ring were removed. Hylian laughed in return, claiming even the Demon King of Lust could not remove it. In an instant, Hylian's hand went flying through the air. Gordon had arrived behind him, resting the arm elegantly upon his sword after cleanly severing it. Hylian jumped away, horrified that a high-ranking demon had bypassed his defenses. Berger arrived behind Hylian, grabbing his shoulder and immobilizing him with sheer fear. Berger formed an orb of dark energy in his hand, mocking Hylian Cargill and telling him it was time to receive a real beating. A massive explosion followed, echoing far outside the tower, marking the end of the hero party's failed mission to rescue the princess. When the dust finally settled, Berger stood over Hylian, glaring down at him. Hylian was still alive, gasping for air and unable to move, though he clung to life in his prone state. Berger commanded the men around him to bind Hylian's hands and throw him into prison, noting that he should do the same to the other humans who had collapsed outside the door as well. Nearby, Granada looked pale and shriveled, muttering to himself that he could see the afterlife. Berger approached him with a blossom flower and instructed him to absorb the energy within the flower. Granada followed the command, and instantly, his drained energy returned, leaving him fully recovered and baffled by the sudden restoration. Granada wondered if Berger had used that precious spirit to heal him, watching the Demon King with a newfound sense of shock. Berger then turned to converse with Loggia, acknowledging his hard work and granting him permission to dismantle the tower. Berger then gave a final call as he ordered everyone to restore and maintain their assigned floors before walking away. As Granada watched, he noted to himself that even after such a fierce battle, Berger appeared completely composed, as expected of a Demon King. Ernan, who was observing the scene, asked if the Demon King was tired. In his throne room, Berger suddenly collapsed, gasping heavily as he whispered to himself that the situation had been far too close. He knew a Demon King could not afford to show weakness, but he struggled for breath, fixated on the human, Hylian Cargill. Berger recognized that Hylian was one of the 10 stars, the 10 strongest heroes on the continent, and although Hylian was one of the weakest among them, Berger had barely used any demonic energy points to strengthen himself in this life. Partly because he didn't have a lot of growth, Berger reasoned that had Hylian been in perfect condition, he never would have won. His plan had successfully exhausted Hylian during the trek to the tower, triggering panic and causing the hero's field of view to narrow, which created the opening Berger needed for an all-out strike. Laying on the ground, he smiled at his own achievement. He had attained a perfect victory, altering a fate that had never been changed in the past. He felt exhilarated by the feat, whispering to himself that he could change the future. Though mocking voices from the near future seemed to laugh at his assertion, Berger remained adamant, dismissing them as he prepared to defy their expectations. The scene shifted to the Beast Tower, where the Demon King screamed in disbelief, questioning how the heroes could have given up so easily. At the Holton Walk press conference, journalists swarmed, demanding accountability for the failure of the hero's journey. Wharton stood before them, insisting that the mission had not yet failed, as Hylian Cargill and the great heroes were still searching for the Demon King. As news of the new Demon King spread rapidly across the continent, the local king expressed his extreme annoyance, declaring that if Hylian failed to rescue the princess, he would be executed. Meanwhile, Louise ignored her knight's updates on the hero's journey, demanding only that he find Lodja. The story of the event became distorted, with rumors circulating that Hylian never returned or was already dead, plunging the world into sorrow while causing Berger's demonic energy points to pile up rapidly. At the Heroes Guild headquarters, the leadership questioned Wharton, who swore on his name that he spoke only the truth. They reasoned that since the identity of the new Demon King remained unknown, they had to be cautious. One member noted that Hylian Cargill, one of the 10 stars, could not be brought down easily, and they decided to wait 10 more days for news. If nothing emerged by then, the 4,728 heroes on the continent would launch a full-scale assault. In the underground prison of Berger's tower, Berger arrived to find Hylian awake, noting that even his recovery speed was exceptional. Hylian demanded to know what Berger wanted, and Berger proposed that the hero become his vessel. Berger dropped a bag of coins, explaining that the hero's journey was costly, filled with expenses for food, security, lodging, and high-grade consumables. He detailed how these costs were usually covered by merchant guilds and nobles, and if the heroes failed, they ended up buried in debt. Since all investments were focused on Hylian, he was now in massive debt. Hylian realized that even if he escaped, he would be branded a failed hero and chased by debt for the rest of his life. When Hylian questioned how Berger knew this, Granada walked in, admitting he had shared the information. Shocked by this apparent betrayal, Hylian screamed, only for Granada to remind him of the hero's previous treatment of him. Berger explained that Hylian's failure stemmed from the fact that no Demon King had operated like him before, and he revealed a levitating organism called a Larmanus orb. Berger noted that once it entered the body, it clung to the brain, allowing him to monitor for hostility and destroy the host's mind with a single gesture. Hylian argued that a hero of his strength was immune to mind control. Granada stood behind with a terrifying skeletal grin, coldly stating that a hero can only lower their mental defenses by their own choice. In front of him, Berger smiled wickedly while holding up the ball. He confirmed that the message was clear. They were about to use absolute terror and torment to force the hero into giving up and lowering those defenses willingly, leaving Hylian horrified. Berger grabbed Hylian by the chin, silenced his protests, and forced the orb down his throat. Hylian's eyes rolled back, and he lost consciousness as his status shifted to that of the Demon King's vessel. Later, in the throne room, Gordon questioned how Berger planned to offset Hylian's massive debt of 100,000 gold, given that their previous exchange had only yielded 2,000 gold. Berger mentioned the upcoming Unison of Towers, a once-a-year gathering of Demon Kings. Though he had shunned such gatherings in his past life, he knew the other Demon Kings had accumulated vast treasures over their long survival. Gordon, initially prepared to argue against exchanging demonic energy for money, received a notification and realized the truth of the situation. Following standard Demon King protocols would have left them vulnerable to the heroes. Acknowledging that he now had no choice but to admit the efficacy of Berger's approach, Gordon informed Berger that their invitation had arrived. Berger smiled faintly, telling Gordon they were going to swindle the senior Demon Kings, and Gordon finally understood that he could believe in his leader. Inside the 13th floor of the Tower of Lies, the Demon King's chambers were already filled when Berger arrived. He addressed the gathering with a confident smile, noting that while he was not late, they had clearly begun discussing matters in his absence. Draxon, the Demon King of Beasts, called out Berger's name with open hostility. Nearby sat Reyna Sodain, the Demon King of Winters, who remarked that Berger was indeed the talk of the town, along with Ugar Belverk, the Demon King of Indestructibility. Finally, Jason Cockmund, the Demon King of Lies, welcomed Berger with open arms. Berger merely smiled and called them fools for forming an alliance, thinking to himself that while he understood this was the pragmatic choice for Arian's case, he intended to taunt them regardless. Ugar stood up and began walking slowly toward Berger, screaming that he was a fool and demanding to know what a newcomer understood about Arian. Berger reasoned that a simple provocation made it easy to identify an opponent's true intentions. He understood clearly that Ugar was out to kill him. Just then, Jason then clapped his hands loudly, instantly taking out all signs of killing intent. He smiled and urged them not to waste precious time, as the occasion was intended for cooperation. Berger noted that Jason had made the killing intent of 2 demon kings vanish instantly, wondering if this was due to some unseen power, or perhaps the influence of the tower itself. Though he resolved not to jump to conclusions without evidence, Jason invited them to begin and asked Berger to voice his thoughts. Berger replied that the meeting was nothing grand. Draxen took the lead, turning his attention to Berger and demanding to know the whereabouts of Hill and Cargill. Berger remained quiet for an awkward moment, just as the scene shifted to a different portion of the tower, where Gordon was being interrogated by aides of the Demon King of Lies and the Demon King of Beasts. When they asked if Hill and Cargill was dead, Gordon replied that he was not sure, as the hero had not even entered their tower and was likely wandering the Urgist Mountains. The demons expressed disbelief, insisting that Hillen should have spotted the tower from afar, but Gordon held firm. Gordon remembered Berger's explicit instruction to tell other aides he knew nothing of Hill and Cargill, as they intended to use the hero as a spy, making secrecy of utmost importance. Gordon admitted to the other demons that the demon king he served was indeed different, though he complained that Berger was a handful and acted like a brat who would get into trouble if left alone for a second. Gordon was thoroughly annoyed, and he thought to himself that he did not understand why he felt so satisfied saying what he had said. Right in front of Gordon, the other demons told him that they completely understood his position, confirming that they really did get it. They openly questioned why all demon kings were so weird, and one of them specifically pointed out that in his own case, his demon king was particularly strange. At that point, they all began to complain about their respective demon kings, right in front of Gordon. Gordon was visibly shocked as he grasped something he actually needed at that moment, which was emotional support. He found himself receiving that exact comfort from the other demons who were gathered around him. Back in the meeting, Ugar screamed at Berger, refusing to believe that Hill and Cargill had not reached his tower simply because it was not placed at the peak. Berger retorted that he was free to construct his tower wherever he wanted. Jason pointed out that heroes were still aiming for Berger's tower, yet he had left it undefended to attend the meeting. He reminded Berger that a demon king who lost his tower would meet a dreadful end, a fact he assumed Berger had learned at the academy. Berger told him not to concern himself with the tower, as he was protecting it in his own way, while internally cursing the Demon King of Lies. Draxen asked if Archduke Arcane Blarenf would allow this, and Berger dismissively asked who cared what the old geezer thought. Berger resolved not to forget that his goal was to earn 100,000 gold. He listened to the other demon kings to gather information and identify who might be short on demonic energy points. Reyna Sodane frequently cast glances at Berger. She seemed to be calling him to have a private chat, which made him feel uncomfortable. Later, on the balcony, Reyna approached him. She admitted she had wanted to speak with him alone because she agreed with some of his points. Berger was taken aback, wondering if she had done the same in his previous life. She clarified that she did not hate the standards, but believed Demon Kings in Arian needed to be more flexible. She handed him a personal transmitter, telling him to call her for advice, provided he did not insult the Demon King standard in front of her. She mentioned she had finally found someone to talk to and hoped he would not disappear too quickly. When Berger asked about the Demon King of Lies, she said she could not read him at all, though he was better than the other two. After she left, Berger realized he could not fully trust her. Back at Berger's tower, Ernan presented cookies she had baked to Loja. Loja was excited, noting that having a genius elementalist like her must be convenient. He took a bite and was blown away, describing the taste as phenomenal, and claiming it moved his mana. Ernan revealed she had put Spirit Blossom in the dough. Loja was shocked she would use something so precious, but she explained it was a gift to keep them close, as they would be seeing each other for a long time. When she asked if Granada would enjoy them, Loja suggested he would enjoy them even more than he did, though she was more concerned about if Berger would like them as well. At the Tower of Lies, the meeting concluded, and everyone had left except for Jason. Jason offered Berger tea and sat down to talk. He then folded his hands and told Berger that he knew he was in need of the human's money. Berger was shocked and glared at Jason, wondering how his plan had been leaked. Berger had no idea that Jason had known his plans all along. Jason looked at Berger and stated that pretending not to know would not work, as Draxen had already told him everything. He smiled and suggested they stop wasting time on pointless mind games, proposing a deal instead: demonic energy points in exchange for human currency. Berger glared at him and asked what his angle was. Jason laughed, claimed he was on Berger's side, and suggested they get along from then on. The scene shifted to the first floor of Berger's tower, where multiple bags of gold coins sat in front of Berger and Hillen Cargill. Hillen was shocked, while Berger told him to take 100,000 gold from the pile. When Hillen expressed disbelief that Berger had actually obtained the money, Berger instructed him to ensure the source of the funds remained hidden. Berger reasoned internally that if Jason could trace the flow of money and perfectly figure out their actions, they could end up as puppets. He resolved that since he could not discern what Jason was plotting, they needed to act with extreme caution. Berger had already converted the rest of the surviving heroes into Black Knights and Black Mages. He gestured toward the group and informed Hillen that the man in the middle was Amon from the Golden Moon Merchant Guild, a detail he had learned when they made the contract. Berger instructed Hillen to use these men to grow the money, promising they would follow his orders to a T. Amon and the other men thought to themselves that they could not believe they had become underlings to the Demon King. The situation was humiliating, and they hoped Hillen would save them. However, Hillen turned to Berger and remarked that since he had kept the members alive, it was not a total failure, and he could pay off his debt as well. He realized that with this, he can keep going about his hero work again. He turned to shake Berger's hand, calling him a business partner, and stating that in the current state of affairs, the arrangement was not so bad. Amon and the other men were shocked by how swiftly Hillen accepted the deal. Berger glared at Hillen and asked what he meant by business partners. He then squeezed the pill he had forced into Hillen's mouth, infusing pain directly into the hero's brain. As Hillen screamed, Berger clarified that they were not partners. Hillen was his slave, and Berger was his master. Amon and the other men laughed as Berger took such a drastic action. Hillen looked up at Berger and joked that he did not know Berger was into that sort of thing. Berger walked away, stating he was not asking for sincere loyalty, and telling Hillen to get moving. By the corner, Ernan called out to Hillen. When Hillen glared at her, she asked if he could deliver a letter to her younger sister, Elena. Hillen questioned if she meant the 13th princess of the Kingdom of Hildurin, asking why she was siding with the Demon King, and reminding her that she was part of why he ended up in this situation. Ernan apologized, explaining that she had no intention of returning to the kingdom right now. She told Hillen that a hero of his status surely knew about the royal family's secrets. Hillen realized that while he had heard rumors of the Hildurin kingdom's secrets, he had not known them to be true. He grasped that her actions were somewhat understandable and agreed to help. Inside the throne room, Gordon spoke to Berger, questioning if the hero would really follow his orders. Berger responded that Hillen was not a despicable man who only cared about money, nor was he particularly noble. He was likely motivated by a desire for popularity. Berger explained that since Hillen wanted to stand out, he was provocative in his actions, and if they controlled him properly using Larmani's orb, he would be the best spy they could ask for. Gordon thought to himself that he could not afford to sit still, considering how deeply Berger had studied humans. Berger noted that if a hero destroyed human society from the inside as the vessel of a demon king, it would be a sight to behold, to which Gordon agreed. Suddenly, someone knocked on the chamber door. To their surprise, Ernan walked in and asked if they would like to try some cookies. She presented the treats, and Gordon passed one to Berger. Berger told her she had been coming and going too comfortably lately, threatening to send her to the underground prison for a month if they tasted bad. Ernan looked confident and told him to judge after trying. Berger took a bite and was shocked by the burst of flavor. Expecting the same reaction Lorja had given, Ernan felt excited. Berger gripped the handle of his throne and shouted that it was not bad for a mere human. He realized she had used spirit blossoms in the dough, which was a dangerous flavor. When he asked if she was returning his favor, he grew uncomfortable, wondering what she wanted from him. Meanwhile, Hillen's hero party safely descended under Krutu's escort. After arriving at Holton Walk, they departed from the Kingdom of Hildurin through a teleportation magic circle. Granada went to the Red Hawk Mercenary Guild's headquarters to establish discipline. He confronted his men, asking why they had run away during the first blizzard and left him behind. The captain tried to explain that they had gone to the Urgist Mountains, a place where even heroes died, and felt they had no choice if they wanted to survive. Granada raised his hand to strike him again. But just then, a woman named Katie called out to him. She looked elegant and introduced herself as a hero who had missed the journey due to her circumstances, but wished to join now. Granada glared at her, while the captain beside him mentioned that she was the one who had paid their bar tabs. Granada turned to smack the captain for being an idiot, then told Cade that the hero's journey was already over. She was shocked to hear that Hillen and the others had left Holton Walk. She asked him to tell her more about his failure. Granada reasoned that he would tell her only what the Demon King allowed. Later, after he finished explaining, she stood up, called it unbelievable that the Demon King's tower was not at the summit, and left 3 gold coins as a token of gratitude before walking away. Granada glared at her departure. The captain remarked that she was clearly a rookie hero, who would be lucky not to be stabbed in the back by her colleagues. Granada told him to stop touching the money. Granada then realized 3 knights were following her. He trailed them to a deserted alleyway, noting they moved without sound despite wearing full-plate armor. When Cade told the knights she refused to return to her fiancé and wanted to live as a hero, Granada deduced she was a princess. Suddenly, one of the knights placed a sword at his neck, demanding to know why he was spying and accusing him of using suspicious magic. Granada panicked, fearing he would be exposed as the Demon King's vessel because of the magical tool he carried. As the knight threatened to kill him for being a potential spy, Granada wondered how to handle the trouble he had stumbled into. A massive explosion rocked the alleyway, drawing the attention of the surrounding knights as Granada sprinted out. A knight following him screamed that he was an assassin and ordered his comrades not to let him escape. The knights took their stances, surrounding the princess, Katie, and assuring her that they would handle the threat. Katie refused to remain calm, insisting that she was a hero as well. As a knight closed in on Granada, he realized he was the only elf in Holton Walk. He understood that using his elfin powers would identify him immediately, but he also sensed he could not escape safely without them. Just as he prepared to use his abilities to save himself, a voice cut through the tension. Berger asked if that was the reason he was late. Heavy flames suddenly engulfed the knight who had been about to strike Granada. Berger floated above them, appearing annoyed as he told Granada that his tardiness was due to him slacking off. The other knights screamed in terror that the Demon King had arrived. Granada looked up and asked if Berger could not see the situation he was in, to which Berger replied that he did not see what all the fuss was about, dismissing the impending fight as minor. The knights shouted that a Demon King had come to kidnap the princess and resolved to protect her with their lives. Katie, however, told them not to mind her, declaring this their chance to defeat a Demon King. Berger was surprised to find out that Kaede was a princess. The knights screamed at them to stop lying and demanded to know why they were there. When Granada asked Berger his reason for appearing, Berger claimed he was on an errand by coincidence. Earlier in his throne room, Berger had asked Ernan what she wanted. She explained that she needed senile powder, a supplement developed centuries ago by an elf named Senile to help humans form contracts with spirits. Berger noted that with her talent, the powder should not be necessary, but Ernan countered that he overestimated her and that there was barely any mana in the tower, meaning her spirits would perish without it. Berger realized she was planning to contract a high-ranking spirit, noting that in his previous life, her success in doing so at 21 had caused an uproar across the continent. Now she was attempting it 7 years early. Though he wondered if her time in the tower had changed her, he dropped a cookie on the plate and told her that as long as it increased the tower's strength, he did not care. Berger headed out, thinking he had his own circumstances to attend to. Back in the alley, Berger surrounded the group, and what followed were colossal explosions around the space. Though, Berger was surprised to see Kaede block his attack. Her guards called out in concern as she took a stance, declaring that a hero's aura was the natural enemy of demonkind, and that she belonged on the battlefield, not in a suffocating royal palace. She unleashed a high-ranking sword technique called the Crescent Moon Slash. As the aura moved toward him, she thought of her grueling training. She had begged her instructor to train her day and night to be recognized as a hero, rather than a princess to be sold off to a foreign king. She believed that defeating a demon king would finally grant her freedom. However, Berger simply grabbed the attack with his hand and crushed it in an instant. He glared at her, noting that her sword aura was not bad. She was speechless, but Berger praised her and simply questioned if she could handle his next assault. Berger then summoned multiple magic circles above them, preparing a massive attack. Kaede, unable to move, realized the true power of a demon king. Berger remarked that she was useful as both a princess and a hero. Despite her plea and the knight's desperate calls, Berger descended the attack, triggering massive explosions. When the dust settled, the villagers were in chaos, lamenting the tragedy and searching for the injured. They found the knights' bodies, but Kaede had vanished. A surviving guard muttered that she had been taken by a demon king. The scene then cuts back to the Berger Tower. Inside the underground prison of Berger's tower, Ernan analyzed the unconscious Kaede. Berger informed Ernan that the prisoner was the 9th Imperial Princess, Khadija Spain, and told her to tend to the girl's injuries, as she would be living on the 4th floor and might become useful. Ernan asked him where she had been found, to which he responded that he had seen her on the way and simply picked her up. He then informed her that in order to secure demonic energy points, he needed to kidnap a prince or a princess periodically, preferably someone with a low rank. Upon hearing that, Ernan turned to him and asked what demonic energy points actually were. He began to explain the concept to her, but suddenly he stopped, as a sharp realization hit him. He began to question why he was telling a prisoner things that were considered highly classified information. Without another word, he walked off, stating that he would go get her some sanar powder. Ernan was left completely surprised by his sudden change of mind. Berger, on the other hand, was feeling a bit baffled by his own actions, and wondered if he had gotten too comfortable with her simply because he saw her so often. He recognized that he needed to get a grip on the situation, reminding himself that the princess was nothing but a prisoner. The news of the princess's kidnapping in Holton Walk spread rapidly. At the Heroes Guild, Helen Cargill faced the leaders, admitting his shame in failing to find the Demon King's tower and offering to take full responsibility. The leaders declined, arguing that holding a hero responsible would discourage others from stepping forward. They explained that the Jaspane Empire was requesting another journey and asked for Helen's opinion. Helen suggested postponing an all-out mission in favor of sending a small reconnaissance unit to locate the tower first. The leaders agreed that this was a sensible strategy. They concurred that the Demon King would be weak, as a powerful ruler would have no reason to hide. One leader concluded that they would temporarily postpone the mission, leaving Helen to wonder if this was exactly what the Demon King had intended all along. The scene shifts to a different location, where Gordon debriefed Berger on the crucial information he had gathered regarding Helen Cargill. Acknowledging the report, Berger commended Gordon but instructed him to maintain a close watch on Helen. After Gordon confirmed the order, the call was terminated. Reflecting on the situation, Berger considered himself fortunate. He doubted that the Heroes Guild was prepared for a full-scale assault just yet, noting that if it had not been for the intelligence on Helen Cargill, the situation could have turned disastrous for his faction. He concluded that choosing Helen to serve as his vessel had undoubtedly been the correct strategic move. With both Helen and Granada operating effectively outside the tower, Berger felt confident that their joint efforts would successfully delay the commencement of the hero's journey. To further solidify his position, Berger had been systematically kidnapping new princesses to accumulate demonic energy points. He calculated that by leveraging Armani's orb he could potentially weaponize the latest princess, transforming her into a genuine asset on the battlefield. Meanwhile, internal preparations within the stronghold were well underway. The dwarf was actively remodeling the tower and further reinforcing the structural defenses of the first floor, while Krutu focused on expanding their overall territory and influence. Berger anticipated that once Princess Ernan successfully formed a contract with a high-ranking spirit, the combined defenses would form an overwhelming force. At that stage, no standard hero's journey would dare attempt an assault on the Berger Tower. Only after achieving this security did Berger plan to pivot his focus entirely toward the outside world, to enact his ultimate vengeance against the heroes who had slain him in the past. However, executing this long-awaited revenge required him to first secure Senal powder. This task demanded traveling to Amur, the Magitech city, a prominent stronghold densely populated by formidable mages and heroes. Recognizing the immense danger of the mission, Berger admitted to himself that acquiring the powder undetected would be exceptionally difficult, requiring absolute stealth to succeed. Inside the Magitech city, a shabby shop located on the outskirts of Jetoson's World of Wonders, the world's best magic market, sat a man with a smoke in his mouth. He remarked aloud that the 9th Princess of Jaspin had been kidnapped as soon as the hero's journey concluded, questioning what the Heroes Guild was doing. He lamented the end of the world, referencing a wanted poster of a hero named Lodger. Just then the door swung open, and the man's demeanor shifted as he welcomed Berger, asking if there was something he was looking for. Berger stated he needed senile powder. Berger observed the shop was run down. The Arkan Kingdom was the holy grail of magic engineering, a place where all heroes, mages, and alchemists on the continent gathered. Because popular shops were built with heroes and mages, there was a huge risk even if Berger concealed his demonic energy. This was precisely why he had purposely chosen a shabby, empty shop. The man screamed that Berger was in luck, claiming there was a special offer for today only, 1 gold. Berger told him to be quiet, and noted that the price was expensive. He also observed that the senile powder he knew of was green, questioning why this version was purple. The man claimed it was a newly developed, highly confidential powder created by the Mage's Tower that had yet to be released to the general market, asserting it was a very rare item that Berger had to buy immediately. The shopkeeper internally calculated that Berger looked like a noble and concluded he must have a reason for being there, affirming to himself that he would turn Berger's pockets inside out. Berger glared at him, realized the man had figured out he could not go to other stores, and wondered if he should kill him for trying to scam him. Just then, Louise Werft walked into the store, and Berger was shocked as he glared at her, recognizing who she was. The knight behind her remarked that if Lodger had a brain, he would not go to popular places. Louise complained that because of Lodger, that motherfucker, she had to come to this shabby place. Berger felt uncomfortable as they walked past him. The dwarf knight approached the store owner to ask if he had seen someone named Lodger. Berger glared at her. He reasoned that she could not recognize him now, likely because he had used a magical tool when they previously fought. The shopkeeper addressed the dwarf knight, stating that he understood they were searching for someone, but claimed he suffered from a sickness where he could not remember things unless he made a sale first. Louise grew furious at the blatant extortion, walking right up to him and pulling out a knife, telling him he did not seem to understand how to read the room. The man reminded her that murder in the capital city was forbidden, but when she grew frustrated, he smiled and told her he would be happy to answer her question if she bought something first, noting he thought she was going to stab him. Louise laughed and agreed to see his wares. The man offered her a product he called Acha powder, claiming it was great for dwarves, and sold it to her for 3 gold. After she paid, she asked again about the dwarf named Lodger. The shopkeeper said he had never heard of that name, but suggested a famous store next to the central square called Roy Diaz Leaf, where blacksmiths gathered. Louise decided to leave, apologizing to Berger on her way out. Just as the princess left, Berger spoke to the shopkeeper, telling him he had sold trash for 3 gold. The man replied that it was because Berger had not said anything, and he assumed the noble young lady would easily pay the price. He offered to teach Berger his secrets for 10 gold. Berger thought the man was a persistent con artist. He had admitted his skills in scamming humans were top-notch. He actually liked the man. Berger leaned in and demanded that he go to the Golden Moon Merchants Guild, shocking the man. Berger told him they would take him in if he claimed he was sent by the mountain. The shopkeeper asked if Berger was connected to the Golden Moon Merchant Guild, noting they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Berger smiled and told him he needed to go, because the person he had just scammed was Louise Werft. The man dropped the bottle, shattering it, as he realized he had been dealing with the crazy hound. Berger told him to join the guild for a monthly salary of 1 gold, or he would bring Louise back. The man began to beg, but suddenly the shopkeeper's demeanor shifted entirely. He snapped at Berger, asking how he dared try to scam him, and told him to get lost. He dared Berger to bring her back, reasoning that even the crazy hound princess would not personally return to a shabby shop like this. But Berger turned and walked off. Later, Louise walked back into the store, looking annoyed. The storekeeper screamed in fear, and Louise beat him to a pulp. Meanwhile, Berger had successfully purchased proper senile powder from a different shop. As he stood outside looking at the bottle, he thought about how even a shop on the outskirts sold legitimate items. Louise walked up to him and thanked him for helping her get a refund, though she lamented that she had only been able to give the shop owner a little beating because he was from a different country. Berger thought to himself that she was as ill-tempered as ever. He asked if she was looking for a blacksmith named Lodger and pulled out a necklace. The knight recognized it as one of Lodger's early works. Berger recalled meeting Lodger in the Ormoth forest 2 months prior, where he had shared his food with the starving man, who gave him the necklace in return. Louise was annoyed that she had bothered Berger again and offered to treat him to alcohol for 5 days. Louise, desperate to capture Lodger before he left, gave Berger a badge that allowed him to swap for the best equipment in the Dwarven Kingdom. As Louise walked off with her knight, she ordered him to call her father and request reinforcements, determined not to let Lodger escape. Berger watched her go, reflecting that he had lost track of time while busy stopping the hero's journey. He knew that around this time, Draxon would discover and absorb the heart of a summoning beast to gain overwhelming strength. This heart was the only thing Berger wanted, as dimensional interference affected him heavily as a new Demon King. He realized that if he were to fight Louise, who was fitted with top-grade equipment, it would be a stalemate or a narrow win. He concluded that, if he wanted revenge against the heroes and to survive, he needed to develop his powers. His plan was to send Louise to Ormoth, to the place where the beast's tower was located. While the crazy hound, Louise Werft, and the demon king of beasts Draxon tore into each other, the summoning beast's heart would be his. After fusing with mana phantoms, the tower gained 2 new functions: remote control of the tower and an item transfer system. Standing outside, Berger communicated with Gordon, telling him that something was up and he was leaving the tower in Gordon's hands for a while. Gordon agreed to take charge. Berger instructed him to deliver 10 top-grade senile powders to Princess Ernan, explaining that these materials were required for her to form a contract with a high-ranking spirit. Upon receiving the items, Ernan was ecstatic, asking if he had gone all the way to the Arkan Kingdom. Gordon confirmed they were top-grade items obtained personally by the Demon King, telling her to use them carefully. Berger also gave Gordon instructions regarding Princess Kade. As long as she behaved, she was to be kept on the 4th floor and trained in swordsmanship so she could be used at full strength. He intended to test her once he returned. Berger then directed Gordon to set up the Hellforge on the first floor and tell Lodger to reinforce the area further. Lodger was seen dashing around the forge in excitement, marveling at the foreign, advanced equipment and the cooler that resembled a living creature. Gordon reminded him to be grateful for the Demon King's generosity. Regarding the Pule Orcs, Gordon explained that they had unified 3 tribes, doubling their numbers, and that the orcs were now grown enough to hunt most monsters in the Urges Mountains. Berger told Gordon to manage the tower properly until he retired, and Gordon vowed not to disappoint him. After ending the communication, Berger jumped off the building, landing instantly. He mused that managing the tower directly without returning was a convenient function. He then called Hillen Cargill. When Hillen answered, Hillen explained that the control of the Golden Moon Merchant Guild was complete, and would be managed by Amon, the Black Knights, and the Black Mages. Hillen noted that one of the 10 stars was providing support, referring to himself, and that he had confirmed one failure would not ruin the reputation of the 10 stars so easily. Berger commended the work and ordered Hillen to pass a message to Granada. They would provide funding through the Golden Moon Merchant Guild so that Granada could buy up every elf slave on the continent. Berger added that he was sending a con man named Jettison to the guild, who would be useful if put to work. Berger arrived at the merchant shop where Jettison sat under a table, trembling in fear. Berger noted that this was the bastard who had the nerve to scam Louise Werft. He told the man that he had tracked all of his personal information and would send an assassin to erase him if he did not show up for work within a month. Jettison covered his mouth in terror. As Berger walked out, Jettison literally plopped on the ground from the relief of his absence. The scene shifted to the Houghtonwalk training ground, where Granada confirmed to Berger that he would gather the elves as quickly as he could. Granada worried internally that while saving his people was good news, dragging them into the Demon King's grasp was suspicious. He wondered if Berger was planning to use them as spies, just like himself. At the Red Hawk Guild, members were training under Granada. Some complained about learning elf swordsmanship and whispered to the vice captain, suggesting they sneak away. Unbeknownst to them, Granada was using magic to track their movements. He used his vines to grab the fleeing men, forcing them to beg for mercy. Granada spoke with Hillen, who reported that Berger was off looking for treasure. The scene cut to the Ormoth Rainforest Kingdom, where Louise Werft was walking through the terrain in a rage. Her knight reported that they had received an ultimatum from Ormoth ordering them to march out with troops. But Louise insisted she had not yet found that bastard lodger. She stated that there was still one place that they hadn't searched. She pointed toward the Beast Mountain, the territory of the Demon King of Beasts, Draxon. Despite her knight's warnings that the area was dangerous, Louise maintained that no one would dare lay a hand on the dwarven royal family, as doing so would trigger a war with every nation that used dwarf-made weapons. Inside Draxon's tower, demons screamed in alarm that Princess Louise Werft was heading toward the Beast Mountain. Draxon was shocked, wondering if she had found out about the heart of the summoning beast. Beneath the magma of a volcano, pure mana energy lay dormant. Draxon knew that if he absorbed that power, he would possess the strongest force imaginable. He ordered his men to stop the princess without killing or seriously injuring her, which his subordinates noted would be difficult. Suddenly, Max Ormoth, the second prince of Ormoth, appeared before Louise. He smiled down at her, declaring the Demon King's territory off-limits. Louise demanded he clear the way. Max mocked the dwarves, explaining that during the all-out war 200 years ago, the Jaspain Kingdom had profited by selling supplies to heroes, and he intended to kill Louise and frame the Demon King for it to trigger a similar lucrative conflict. She looked up at the men of the Ormoth Kingdom and called them bastards. They suddenly screamed and dashed towards her, declaring that she was surrounded, and Max Ormoth ordered his men to kill them all. Impending danger loomed directly in front of Louise, but she took a firm stance as her men steadied their shields around her, and she declared that anyone who wanted to die should step forward. Inside the Demon King's castle, Draxon heard that the dwarves were about to be killed and panicked, ordering his monsters to save the princess at all costs to prevent a full-scale offensive. Outside, the dwarf knights accompanying Louise were being overwhelmed by the Ormoth soldiers. Her knight urged her to escape as they broke a path, but Louise remained annoyed and frustrated. As Max Ormoth prepared a finishing blow, he suddenly felt a ferocious demonic energy. He turned to find Berger standing behind him, wearing a mask that jammed official recognition. Berger noted that Ormoth's attack was not part of his plan, and remarked that human interests were complicated, declaring to the prince that he would not leave this forest alive. Max Ormoth commanded his men to hold off the upper-ranked demon while he focused on the princess, but Louise dashed forward with surprising speed. She ignored the soldiers Max sent to intercept her, attacking him directly and leaving him baffled by her physical prowess for a dwarf. Before Max could react, he felt the heavy, suffocating weight of Berger's demonic energy encircling the space, which left him stunned and suppressed. Seizing the moment, Louise slashed across Max's torso, slicing him into 2 pieces in an instant. Following the prince's death, the remaining soldiers rushed toward Louise. But she realized the oppressive demonic energy had suddenly vanished. She stood her ground against the charging men, shouting that they had attacked her first, and that she would send them to the afterlife to keep the prince company. Her knights moved to cover her with crossbows, and a massive battle erupted. From a distance, Berger stood atop a tree, watching the chaos unfold with a smile. He hoped the Demon King of Beasts, Draxon, would take the bait. 5 minutes earlier, Draxon had felt the heavy demonic energy Berger intentionally radiated within his territory and grew furious. Draxon recognized that an elite demon, upper ranked or higher, had intruded, and he found the timing of this event, occurring right as the princess and prince clashed, to be perfectly orchestrated. When Draxon confronted his subordinates outside, they apologized, explaining that Louise had already been surrounded by Ormoth's soldiers when they arrived and had handled the situation herself, killing the second prince. Draxon was relieved to learn that Louise was not in a disadvantageous position, but he realized the Ormoth warriors presented a new problem. If he killed them, they would pin the prince's murder on him. He ordered his men to let the survivors leave so they could testify in his favor, then demanded to know if they had found the intruding demon. When they failed to identify the intruder, Draxon grew annoyed at their incompetence, and decided to use a technique called ultrasensory amplification, which maximized his senses by concentrating demonic energy into his sensory organs. Using this, he detected traces of an unfamiliar demon's energy coming from a distant mountain. Realizing it was all a trap to lure him away from the volcano, Draxon leaped toward the mountain, cursing the Demon King who orchestrated the scheme. Meanwhile, Berger reached the heart of the mountain, where he found the magma was not ordinary. It was being drained to access the power of a summoning beast. Protecting himself with dragonic scales, Berger descended into the heat, where a massive beast emerged and attacked him. Berger stopped the attack easily, laughed, and dragged the creature into the mutant lava where it melted. Berger survived due to his affinity with dragons, and looked down to see the corpse of a phoenix. He recognized it from his studies at the Demon King Military Academy, knowing that any Demon King who fully absorbed a phoenix became powerful enough to leave their name in history. Berger thanked Draxon for absorbing it in his previous life, as it allowed him to know the location of this treasure in the present. He stretched out his hand and began to absorb the phoenix's energy. Back in the forest, a frustrated Draxon dashed toward the mountain, dismissing the possibility that his rivals Reyna or Ugar could have planned such an operation. He arrived at the mountain entrance, shoving past workers who tried to stop him as he rushed toward the lava. Upon arriving, they informed him that the tiger guard had been dragged into the lava, causing him immense shock. He panicked, screaming that someone was trying to steal the phoenix. Suddenly, the lava bulged upward, and a magnificent surge of energy erupted from the volcano, felt as far away as the Berger Tower. Draxon screamed at Jason, believing him to be the culprit, just as a massive eruption formed the shape of a phoenix in the sky, showcasing the overwhelming power Berger had successfully claimed. Deep within the forest, Berger lay on the ground, disoriented and surrounded by a swarm of wild animals that were acting strangely friendly toward him. He realized he had been blown far away following the volcanic eruption after the summoning beast's mana had been absorbed into his body. Berger felt uncomfortable and realized something was wrong with his own physical state. When he looked at his reflection in a pool of water, he noticed his hair had turned red, and he was left speechless. Meanwhile, in the Ormoth Palace, Louis Worf knelt down in front of the king of the Urmoth tribe and said that Prince Mark Urmoth and the brave warriors of Urmoth saved them from the underlings of the Beast Demon King and sadly met their end. The king responded by telling her that it was enough, and that he raised his son as a brave warrior. She screamed back at him, questioning if falling on the battlefield while protecting the weak was considered an honor, adding that it absolutely was not. This response caused the king to become extremely angry. He banged his throne and screamed at her to tell the Hero Guild right now to have them prepare a hero's journey to execute the Demon King of Beasts, and she affirmed to do as instructed. Back at the forest, Berger initiated a call with Hillen Cargill to receive a report, though Hillen was shocked to see Berger's transformed appearance. Berger brushed off Hillen's concern, identifying himself as his master despite the change in appearance. Hillen reported that a hero's journey was being planned at the request of the King of Ormoth. He explained that Rissel Chant, a 10-star hero and top-class battle mage specializing in flame magic, would serve as the captain, while the vice-captain would be the 10-star hero Pallav Disrod, a master of martial might. The mission objective was to subjugate the Beast Demon King with a force of 500, including 200 heroes, gathering in Ormoth before attacking the Tower of Beasts. Berger noted that the presence of only 2 10-star heroes among 200 participants suggested that people were pulling strings behind the scenes to keep the Beast Demon King alive, as the tower served as a profitable goldmine for humans. Berger ordered Hillen to participate in the journey, instructing him to absorb the Beast Demon King's power himself to bolster his reputation. Hillen expressed gratitude but worried that becoming stronger might lead to him being able to oppose Berger. Berger glared at him with a look of disdain and questioned whether he thought absorbing a mere 2 Demon Kings would be enough to oppose him. This statement caused Hillen to become very scared. He replied that there were no worries and to just leave it to him before he left the call. Just then, Berger began to call someone else while muttering to himself that he should be heading back. Berger then contacted Gordon, who was similarly baffled by his master's new appearance. Gordon reported that the Tower of Beasts had requested an emergency meeting of Demon Kings, which Draxen had initiated. The scene shifted to the Tower of Beasts, where Ugar and Reyna arrived through portals, joining Draxen to wait for the final attendees. Berger could not afford to be late, or else he would become a suspect, so he quickly morphed back to his demon form and dashed away from the forest. While he was flying, Gordon called him to say that since Berger was in Ormoth at that moment, Gordon would move to the Tower of Beasts alone via a portal. Berger told him not to do that. Gordon was taken aback and questioned if Berger was moving right then. Berger responded that he would arrive soon and then cut the call. Berger thought to himself that if he arrived on foot without using a portal, Draxen would question him and ask if he was nearby. He would have nothing to say, which would obviously make Draxen suspicious. However, arriving late would also raise suspicions. Therefore, he first needed to return to his tower, and then take a portal with Gordon. With that plan, he moved swiftly. While moving, Berger realized that his current speed would not be enough, and that he would be late by more than 10 minutes. He tried to fly even faster, but just then, he felt something surge from his heart as if flames were about to engulf it. Suddenly, his demonic wings transformed into the wings of a phoenix, giving him the needed boost. He looked back, shocked at the sight of his new wings. The more his heart pounded heavily, the more he felt a powerful energy surge within him. He definitely felt a difference in his heart. He began to wonder if that was the reason the animals had swarmed around him earlier. The speed he gained from this new transformation was shocking, but it was fast enough for him to possibly make it to the meeting on time. It felt almost too fast, as the wind blew heavily against his face. Just then, Berger finally arrived at his tower, striking the building and falling limp to the ground. He picked himself back up and realized that he had arrived on time, though he could not easily control the motion. He knew he would have to tame the phoenix and be more careful next time. He then called out to Gordon, asking if he was ready. Gordon responded by asking if Berger was on the first floor. Berger confirmed that he was, and told Gordon to hurry up. Berger walked into his tower and told Gordon that they were moving to the Tower of Beasts immediately. In Ormoth, a crowd gathered to catch a glimpse of the idle Rissel chant. Though she sat elegantly, she treated the men attempting to greet her with insults, calling them riffraff. When Hillen Cargill arrived, the crowd praised him as the hero who had defeated the Demon King of Lost, but Rissel mocked him as a loser, noting he was no longer wearing his beauty ring. Hillen, worried that Rissel would reveal how he actually killed the previous Demon King, internally cursed her while maintaining a facade of professional courtesy. Rissel declared that she alone would finish off the Beast Demon King, sparking a tense, silent rivalry between the two heroes. Berger and Gordon returned to the Tower of Beasts through their own portal, arriving simultaneously with Jason. Draxen called out to Jason Cockmund and Berger Deus, noting that they had made it in time. He added that he would explain the details once they were inside. Berger nodded, though he felt relieved that they had not arrived late. Once the group gathered in a circle on the top floor, Ugar called out to Draxen, questioning the purpose of the emergency meeting. Jason speculated that it might be related to the hero's journey of the Demon King of Lust, which had gathered in Ormoth. Draxen confirmed that one of the assembled Demon Kings had sent a high-ranking demon into his territory to steal the corpse of a phoenix he intended to absorb. He added that this same bastard had caused the death of the second Prince of Ormoth, thereby triggering the current hero's journey. The other Demon Kings speculated among themselves. Draxen expressed his fear that someone was trying to orchestrate a full-scale continental offensive to take him out, and he declared that he would purchase the key to the Black Box, a device in every tower that recorded a Demon King's actions to identify the culprit. Berger grew worried, realizing that if Draxen opened the Black Box there would be no way to hide his involvement. Draxen demanded that everyone grant permission to open the box, implying that only the culprit would hesitate. Despite his inner turmoil, Berger rose his hand along with the others and granted permission. After the meeting, Berger reasoned that because the key was a single-use consumable that cost an enormous amount of demonic energy points, Draxen would not use it until after the hero's journey failed. Berger concluded that he had to deal with Draxen before then. Upon returning to his own tower, Berger decided to inspect his defenses. On the first floor, he found Lodger, who proudly presented the Inferno Catapult Mark I, a magic cannon born from the Forge of Hell. Lodger laughed frantically, praising his own masterpiece, while Berger, feeling baffled by the man's erratic behavior, merely allowed him to continue his work. They proceeded to the second floor, where Kide attacked Berger, shouting that she would make him regret training her. Berger caught her strike and shattered her attack in an instant, noting she had not changed. Kide lunged again, attempting her combat sword technique, the Crimson Moon / variant, but Berger countered her effort with a magic orb of energy. Our boy Berger certainly makes combat look effortless. The impact left Kide shriveled on the ground, and Berger learned from Gordon that she had been moved to the second floor because Princess Ernan was busy with a summoning on the fourth floor. On the fourth floor, Ernan was exhausted, having used most of the top-grade senile powders to create a complex magic circle. She chanted for the Great Spirit of Water, Guardian of Water, bound by body, blood, and soul, and offered her own blood to the circle. A portal opened, and the high-ranking water spirit, Neronel, appeared, appearing pleasantly surprised to find someone talented enough to summon her within a Demon King's tower. The two touched hands, sealing the contract and causing a massive light to envelop the room. Ernan floated within a sphere of water, but as the water vanished, she fell limp. Berger caught her just before she hit the ground. As Berger held her, Ernan quickly covered her chest area to avoid spilling unnecessary secrets of that area to Berger. Berger smiled, remarking that he had almost missed a rare sight, and praised her work. Ernan chuckled and told him she loved the Demon King, a statement that immediately shocked her. She desperately tried to deny the sentiment, claiming she had not said anything, but the spirit Neronel giggled from behind her, admitting that she was the one who had blurted it out. The spirit confessed that her hobby was reading romance novels, particularly those featuring forbidden love. Berger glared at the troublesome spirit, while Ernan, feeling flustered, realized she had just formed a pact with a very chaotic companion. Ernan looked flustered, demanding to know what the spirit was talking about. Neronel, the high-ranking water spirit, smiled and remarked that the pure love between a demon king and a princess would spread even through the spirit realm. She teased them, asking when they were planning to start dating, and if they were still in the flirting stage. When Ernan urged her to go back, Berger intervened, asking the spirit how he appeared to her in his current state. Neronel looked at him, surprised, and remarked that he looked like a handsome demon king destined to end up with the princess. Berger then transformed, drawing upon the energy of the phoenix, and asked the question again. The spirit was visibly shocked by his sudden presence, noting that a moment ago he had been a mere lump of demonic energy, but now he possessed an unbelievable, pure, divine essence. Berger realized that if he could fool the eyes of a high-ranking spirit, then other demon kings and heroes would surely not notice his true identity either. He smiled, feeling confident that at this level, he could take care of the demon king of beasts himself. Ernan, however, remained surprised by the idea of one demon king eliminating another. Elsewhere, Berger flew swiftly through the air while on a call with Gordon. Gordon screamed, incredulous that a demon king would actively set out to kill another of his kind. Berger explained casually that he was stepping out to eliminate Draxen. Gordon was momentarily stunned, reacting as if this were a mundane errand before realizing the absurdity of the situation and demanding an explanation. Berger reminded him that if he did not deal with Draxen before the latter opened the black box, he would be the one to die. Gordon expressed his concern, noting the inherent danger. Berger had not yet overcome the dimensional energy that suppressed intruders. Gordon explained that every dimension was hostile to outsiders, crushing them with dimensional energy and making them drastically weaker than they were in the demon realm. The Demon King's tower was the only medium connecting the Demon King to the demon realm, allowing them to draw enough energy to regain their original power. The height of the tower signified the Demon King's strength, and since Berger's tower was only 5 floors compared to Draxen's 13, victory was not guaranteed. Berger acknowledged this, admitting he had not yet fully adapted to the Phoenix's heart, but he revealed his plan. He would participate directly in the hero's journey under the name File, using his new form with red hair. He ended the call and surged toward the Tower of Beasts. In the forest, the heroes were retreating, exhausted from fighting waves of weak demons. Hillen Cargill was attending to wounded knights when Berger, now using the name File, approached him. Hillen was shocked by his appearance, but Berger kept his identity hidden. Hillen explained that they had set out to clear the Tower of Beasts as planned, and while they had successfully weakened the Demon King of Beasts by targeting his tail, their assault had faltered. Rewrote Chant had been severely injured, and the lack of potions had forced them into a disadvantageous retreat, resulting in a failed mission. Berger realized he was in an even more precarious position than before. Hillen noted that they had dealt a heavy blow, but they lacked the resources to try again. With that realization, Berger resolved that there was still time. Before Draxon could restore the tower, they simply needed to restart the hero's journey. Turning to Hillen, Berger questioned why Palav Disrod had allowed Rewrote Chant to be attacked, pointing out that Disrod was supposed to be guarding the mages. Razel spat back in frustration, calling Disrod a bastard, and explaining that he had fled right before the assault on the Tower of Beasts began. Just then, Roselle walked into the area. Under their watchful glares, she explained that Palav Disrod's sponsors profited from the tower's continued existence, dismissing them all as money-crazed bastards. Surprised by her entrance, Berger confirmed her identity as Rewrote Chant. Roselle noted that Berger had clearly arrived late in hopes of joining the hero's journey, though she pointed out the obvious mess left in the wake of the assault. When Berger asked if she had the will to try again, Roselle was momentarily shocked. She glared at him and fiercely declared her resolve to kill the Demon King of Beasts no matter what. Gesturing toward her eyes, she made it clear that the demon was responsible for her injury, and she had no intention of backing down. Hillen interjected, pointing out the grim reality of their situation. With too many wounded and their potion supply completely depleted, an immediate second attempt seemed impossible. Berger dismissed the concern as a simple problem. Opening his subspace, he revealed an abundance of potions, explaining that he had prepared them in advance for the journey. While the drafts could not regenerate missing limbs, they would easily restore the wounded to fighting condition. Roselle stared at him, demanding to know his true identity and his motives for going so far to help them. Furthermore, she questioned the faint, pure warmth she had been sensing from within him, wondering how anyone could possess such untainted energy. Hearing her words, Berger realized she was sensing the phoenix energy inside his body. Looking around at the broken survivors, he knew that potions alone would not restore their shattered morale. However, since he intended to lead them to kill Draxon anyway, he decided it was time to give them a demonstration to rally their spirits. Activating the phoenix heart, Berger instructed them to follow him quietly. He began to ascend into the air, creating a phenomenal sight that left everyone stunned. Even Roselle could only watch in wonder as she recognized the powerful phoenix energy resonating from him. Looking down at the awestruck crowd, Berger answered her earlier question. He declared himself the owner of the Phoenix, introducing his identity as File, and confidently proclaimed that he could kill the Demon King of Beasts. Roselle was struck with awe, realizing that this was the legendary summoning beast. She wondered if this man was the true source of the overwhelming presence that had covered the sky and been felt from a distance not long ago. His mana alone rivaled that of a 10-star hero, leaving her to wonder where such a powerhouse had come from. With File now standing before them, a surge of hope returned to the shattered group. Looking up at Berger, their despair shifted into determination, filled with the newfound conviction that they actually stood a chance at slaying the Demon King of Beasts. Draxon sat upon his throne, frustrated that the tower restoration had consumed far more demonic energy than he had anticipated. Because of this, he could only purchase a single key for the black box. He held the key in his hand, resolving to open the rest later. He inserted the key into the black box of one of the Demon Kings who had granted approval to their black box. As he opened it, a tape containing the recorded past events of that Demon King began to play. Swirling around the room, Draxon watched the sequence intently, and soon he was screaming in disbelief, questioning if the events were real. He knew the black box could not be manipulated, and he felt extreme discomfort at what he witnessed. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside the tower. Draxon stood up, demanding to know what had happened. A subordinate reported that the heroes had invaded. The door burst open, and a new group of heroes entered, led by the 10-star hero Ralph Schmitz. The scene shifted to 1 hour earlier in Ormoth. After Berger had declared himself the one blessed by the Phoenix, the morale of the gathered forces had soared. They were eager to return and annihilate the demons, using Berger as their motivation. While Berger felt satisfied that his morale-boosting plan had worked, he remained concerned about his ability to control the Phoenix's mana in actual battle. He landed and spoke to Hillen and Roselle, noting that their current force was insufficient with only 2 10-star heroes. He expressed a wish for reinforcements, to which Roselle replied that he was in luck, as a useful hero had arrived. Ralph Schmitz stepped into the space, introducing himself as a 10-star hero. Back in the present, Ralph stood at the front of the group with his shield. As the beasts launched a coordinated assault, Ralph instantly positioned his shield to deflect the incoming strikes. None of the attacks could pierce his defense. He then struck his shields together to form one massive barrier. The eyes engraved on the shield glowed brightly, triggering a massive explosion that annihilated everything directly in front of him. Ralph Schmitz was indeed a powerful tank, ranking second among the 10-star heroes. His shield was known for reflecting impact, making him a difficult opponent. Berger watched, remembering that this bastard had been among those who laughed at him in his previous life, and though Berger wanted to tear him apart, he prioritized dealing with Draxen first. Russell turned to Berger, remarking that if they had waited for Ralph to arrive, they could have won without any injuries. Berger cautioned her not to underestimate the Demon King, explaining that they always held a trump card for their final moments. He suspected that if Draxen had purchased the key after restoring his tower, he might deploy a secret weapon. Inside Draxen's throne room, the heroes cut through the remaining monsters. They were puzzled by the lack of underlings on the highest floor. Draxen sat on his throne, smiling at them, and mocked the heroes for thinking he would be unprepared for a second attempt on his life. A dense, suffocating wave of demonic energy filled the room. Draxen explained that he had gathered all his vessels and intended to absorb their energy into his own form to eliminate them. Berger watched, observing that while Demon Kings usually place their strongest monsters on the highest floor, Draxen had found a loophole to absorb his underlings' power instead. Draxen roared, his voice shaking the entire chamber as the air began to swirl violently around him. Some heroes dashed forward, ignoring calls to stop. The heroes suddenly halted as they witnessed a raging attack from Draxen, sweeping across the entire space. Ralph instantly raised his shield to block the oncoming assault, shielding the men positioned behind him. Even so, the shockwave was enormous, blowing back multiple heroes across the battlefield. Ralph himself struggled against the immense pressure, his body recoiling under the force of the massive strike. Steadily regaining his resolve, Ralph struck his shield back together just as he had done before. This action unleashed a massive counterattack that surged straight toward the Demon King of Beasts. The blast flew toward Draxen mid-transformation, but the warlord completed his change just in time. Glaring at his opponents, Draxen exhaled heavily in sheer annoyance. With a single, swift swoop, he shattered Ralph's incoming attack right in front of him. This effortless deflection deeply shocked Helen and Roselle, who watched in disbelief as their enemy brushed off the strike so easily. Draxen mockingly questioned if that was all they had to offer. He began advancing toward them, releasing a suffocating amount of demonic energy that completely engulfed the area. Cornered and with nowhere to run, everyone was forced to stand their ground. The knights felt the heavy pressure, wondering what kind of demonic energy could mimic a choking poison at their throats. The sheer weight of the aura proved too much for some, causing them to collapse to the ground. In that critical moment, Berge began to morph into the Phoenix. Activating an advanced defensive magic, he generated a massive shield that enveloped everyone standing behind and around him. A collective wave of relief washed over the battlefield as Berge secured their defense. Determined not to let Draxen freely accumulate any more demonic energy, with the magic successfully activated, Berge warned the others that staying out there would only make them a hindrance, and strictly ordered everyone to remain inside the barrier. The protected soldiers thanked him in unison. With the rest of the forces safely shielded, only Helen, Ralph, Roselle, and Berge remained on the front lines to face Draxen. Looking down at them, Draxen noted that only the 4 of them were still capable of moving. His eyes then landed directly on Berge, glaring in annoyance as he recognized the distinct phoenix energy radiating from him. Draxen muttered that one among them possessed a mana that was bound to be a major pain. Knowing exactly what the Demon King was realizing, Berge simply smiled in response. The battle was about to get incredibly heated. Draxen, visibly annoyed, lunged forward to attack Berger, screaming that he was not satisfied with merely stealing the power of the Phoenix and now dared to set foot inside his tower. Due to the protection barrier Berger had cast over the group, they were shrouded in pure silence, unable to hear a single thing. Berger calmly responded that his control reigned supreme within this entire domain. When Draxen landed on the shield surrounding them, he found he could not budge it. Meanwhile, Roselle felt extremely lucky, realizing that Berger had cancelled the Beast Demon King's roar, preventing their magic incantations from being detected. She immediately utilized an advanced binding chain magic, Sage's Chain. Multiple chains descended upon Draxen, and causing him to cough up blood. Draxen screamed, calling them pathetic worms and asking if they truly thought such a petty trick would work on him. He instantly shattered the chains and dashed forward, striking the ground. Everyone managed to jump away just in time. Draxen roared again, declaring that this was no longer a fight but a hunt, and he stated he would devour Berger first. Berger simply fell silent, remaining calm, while Berger noted that he could not hear anything because of his own silent skill. This only served to further annoy Draxen. While Berger engaged Draxen in a heated, fast-paced duel, the others struggled to track their movements. Hillen remembered Berger's previous briefing. The Beast Demon King's greatest assets were his bulk and agility, so they had to target his weak points, his legs. Berger had assured them he would provide the signal at the right moment. Back in the present, Draxen swung his claws, firing long-range attacks and screaming that he did not care about Berger's motivations. He warned that now that Berger had bared his fangs, he would not leave the tower alive. Berger dodged the attacks by weaving and flying backward. He pulled out Larmani's orb, which he used to control Hillen. Upon seeing the orb, Draxen mocked him, questioning if he really thought such a thing would work. Berger calmly explained that while it would not work on Draxen, the orb transmitted information from the master to the vessel. Draxen scoffed, asking what change that could bring, since there were no vessels to help Berger. Suddenly, Hillen leaped upward, landing near a rock beside Berger. Hillen raised his sword, screaming that his head felt as though it were splitting and that Berger should never use the orb again, even as he prepared a decisive blow. Draxen was incensed, accusing Berger of making a hero his vessel. Berger retorted that heroes were quite useful if one could survive against them. Hillen swung his sword heavily, unleashing a massive burst of lightning. Draxen barely managed to use his arm to deflect the worst of the strike. Draxen smiled, calling Berger arrogant, but he was soon surrounded by multiple incoming attacks. This was the moment Berger had planned. He had told Roussel that when Hillen matched the signal and created an opening, she was to pour out every bit of her grudge for her lost eye. Roussel roared that she would use all of her mana to eliminate him. She unleashed a top-tier flame magic spell, Satellite Cannon. A massive blast struck Draxen, causing the entire space to explode. Draxen could barely withstand the power of the strike. As the dust settled, Draxen's silhouette emerged from the smoke. His body was severely burned, and he could barely move. Berger watched, realizing Draxen was far tougher than anticipated. Draxen screamed, releasing a massive surge of demonic energy. Ralph had to use his shield to guard the heroes. Yet even so, the shockwave of the wide-area attack managed to slice through the chests of Ralph, Roussel, and Hillen. Draxen, fueled by rage, launched himself toward Berger, screaming that he was a demon king destined to conquer the dimension and would not allow them to leave. Berger smiled, noting that Draxen's fierce form had vanished, leaving only a wicked beast. Berger released a massive attack that pushed Draxen backward. While Draxen was distracted, Ralph, despite his injuries, positioned himself behind the Demon King and used his recoil attack to strike Draxen's tail, his weak point. Roussel, coughing up blood, managed to cast her binding chain magic once more, pinning Draxen to the ground. Hillen, gathering the last of his strength, imbued his body with heavy lightning. As Draxen screamed Berger's name, Hillen dashed forward, his blade cutting through Draxen in a final, fierce strike. Berger watched from the corner, whispering a final farewell to the Beast Demon King. As Hillen dealt the final blow, Draxen's head flew off and landed on the ground, lifeless. The surrounding knights erupted in cheers, shouting that Hillen Cargill had defeated the Beast Demon King. Hillen raised his sword to acknowledge their praise, internally relishing the attention and hoping for even more, as he envisioned himself becoming the strongest hero in history. Suddenly, the tower began to collapse. People scrambled to grab treasure and rescue the wounded, while others prioritized escaping. Berger stood near Draxen's severed head, wondering if someone like him would ever receive a second chance. He concluded that even if he did, it would be meaningless, as those who could not let go of the Demon King's standards were destined to meet the same fate. Later, Hillen and Roussel conversed, with Roussel questioning if this had been his plan all along to claim the head of the Beast Demon King. Hillen attempted to deny it, but Roussel cut him short. Though she remained suspicious, she acknowledged that she owed him her life from their previous encounter and decided to drop the subject. She claimed the corpse of the Beast Demon King, to which Hillen laughed and raised no objections. Meanwhile, other heroes discovered the kidnapped princesses within the ruins of the tower. Roussel recognized one of them as Lavinia Akan, the princess of the Akan kingdom. She berated the princess for her recklessness in entering the tower alone to gather materials for Chimera research. After confirming that the Beast Demon King had not harmed her, Roussel carried her away. Berger watched them, realizing that Draxen's wealth had likely come from such deals with the princess. and mused on the complicated nature of human society. The scene shifted to a meeting of the Heroes Guild Elder Council. The members lamented the loss of the Tower of Beasts as an important hunting ground. They were disturbed by reports that a person calling themselves the Phoenix Master had led the hero's journey to victory. Suspicious of this unaffiliated individual, they ordered an immediate investigation into the identity of the Phoenix Master, noting that abnormalities had been constant ever since the Demon King descended upon the Urgest Mountains. At an Ormoth royal banquet, the king thanked the heroes for their service. Racelle sat in a corner, elegantly drinking a cocktail, when Helen approached to compliment her dress. She brushed off his flattery and asked why Phile was nowhere to be found, as she had questions regarding the Phoenix. Other heroes also expressed their desire to meet and thank the mysterious savior. Ralph Schmitz finally spoke up, calling the Phoenix Master truly incredible, but Helen confirmed that Berger had already departed. Berger had indeed returned to his tower in the Urgest Mountains, where Gordon greeted him and expressed disbelief that he had actually killed the Beast Demon King. Berger ordered Gordon to stop spreading dust and sat in his chair, reasoning that since Draxon was dead, he needed to be present at his own tower to avoid suspicion when the other Demon Kings contacted him. He realized that while he had been successful, he remained weak, and both his own power and the Phoenix's energy required further strengthening. A call came in from Jason, who requested a conference at his tower. Berger feigned surprise, acting frightened when Jason informed him that Draxon had been killed. Jason added that a new Demon King had already descended, which shocked Berger, who found the pace of events unnervingly fast. He reasoned that with the tower and its black box destroyed, there was no evidence linking him to the act. Upon arriving at the council meeting in the Tower of Lies, Berger was greeted by a woman who resembled a succubus. She introduced herself as Vivian Blunt, the queen of the Blood Moon tribe. Unbeknownst to Berger, she had been instructed by Archduke Arcane Blarimph to thoroughly investigate the suspicious invasion of Draxon's territory and to keep a close watch on Berger Diaz, whom the Archduke suspected of being the most likely to violate Demon King standards. Vivian, however, merely smiled, confident that she could easily win over the unfriendly ones. As the conference began, Vivian stood up, walked toward Berger, and sat down in front of him, crossing her legs. She told him she was curious about the Demon King, who had managed to turn the demon realm upside down. She leaned in, confessed she was attracted to him, and extended her hand, inviting him to join her that night. Berger smacked her hand away and flatly called her an ugly bitch. Vivian was left completely stunned, struggling to comprehend how someone could reject the queen of the succubi. Reyna turned to Vivian and suggested it was time for her to return to her seat, noting that while the meeting was a welcome reception, its primary purpose was to determine how Draxon had been defeated so helplessly. She instructed Vivian to maintain her dignity and return to her seat. Jason, observing this, was surprised to find Reyna overseeing the meeting. Vivian smirked at Reyna, asking if she also desired Berger. Reyna simply laughed at the absurdity of the question, and Vivian, agreeing to stop for the moment, returned to her seat. Jason resumed the meeting, noting that the 10-star heroes had been the main force during the recent hero's journey. The Demon Kings shared their collected information, with the emergence of the powerful Phoenix Master becoming a major topic of discussion. Though opinions varied, the meeting concluded with a collective decision to investigate the Phoenix Master more thoroughly and proceed with extreme caution. Berger, having played the role of Phile during the event, realized he had been unable to monitor the other demons. He resolved to be more careful about exposing his face. He glanced at Vivian, thinking to himself that he now also had to contend with someone on a secret mission from Archduke Arcane Blarimph. When he looked at her, Vivian blew him a kiss, which made Berger blush and look away, though he told himself he did not need to worry about her too much. Later, at Berger's tower, Kaede crept through the first floor, sensing that surveillance had grown lax. Assuming Princess Ernan was elsewhere, she saw an opportunity to escape. As she approached the main door, she heard a voice asking where she was going. Princess Ernan stood there, stating that for the safety of the tower and for Kaede's own sake, she would stop her. Kaede took a firm stance, declaring that she did not want to fight, but was left with no choice. Suddenly, Gordon entered the scene and told them to let her leave if she wished. Both women were shocked, but Gordon simply added that whatever happened was not his problem, remarking that this was why one should never treat humans kindly. Kaede, wondering what scheme was afoot, dashed toward the door. However, the moment she touched it, she felt a powerful electric shock, and a massive explosion erupted in front of her face, blasting her across the room. Ernan watched in shock as Kaede landed on the floor, disheveled and burnt. Gordon explained that the door triggered an explosion for anyone without the Demon King's permission. Ernan approached the door to check it, but Gordon warned her not to touch it recklessly. Ernan went against Gordon's instructions and placed her palm on the massive door. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a rush of air entered the massive tower, much to Gordon's shock. Ernan glanced at Gordon and told him that she simply felt like it would work. She began to shake her head with a look of embarrassment, wondering why it had actually worked. She was about to close the door when Berger's hand suddenly appeared. He grabbed the door, opened it slightly wider, and asked Ernan if she had opened the door herself to finally attempt an escape. Ernan was shocked to see him, while Gordon greeted Berger as he arrived. Berger looked at the chaos unfolding right in front of him and asked what they were all doing. They returned to the top floor, where Berger sat on his throne. After being briefed on Katie's attempt, he ordered her to be locked in the underground dungeon. Gordon then questioned Berger about how Ernan had been able to open the door, as only those with his permission should be able to leave. Berger simply replied to Gordon that the tower has recognized the princess as one of its members. He then watched Ernan through a surveillance screen, wondering why, despite her contract with a high-ranking spirit which can make it easy for her to cross the Urgus Mountains, she had not yet attempted to escape. He began to question her true purpose. In the underground prison, Ernan confronted Kaede, who told her that kindness without reason did not exist and urged her to leave before the Demon King's schemes caught up with her. Ernan revealed that she had come to the prison on her own. Upon saying that, she looked directly toward Berger's surveillance, almost as though she wanted him to pay attention. She confessed to Katie that she had run away because she hated the royal family and her father. Although she was kidnapped at first, she chose not to return. Katie was stunned. Berger watched their conversation, wondering why Ernan was revealing these things. Katie screamed that among the many princes and princesses of Hildren, only Ernan was born with such overwhelming talent, destined to be the next queen. She asked why Ernan would throw away a brilliant future to become a Demon King's subordinate. Ernan responded by noting that while there were officially 28 princes and princesses, there were actually 62, and aside from herself, not a single other name was known. She advised Kaede to ask the Empire about this secret upon her return. As Ernan walked away, Kaede screamed that the truth would become known. Kaede questioned Ernan on if she did not care about what would happen to the kingdom and the royal family's honor, but Ernan simply smiled and left, telling her they would see each other tomorrow. Back in his chamber, Berger realized this was a secret known only to the high nobility. He called Gordon and ordered him to prepare Ernan, as they were going to search for spirit blossoms. Outside in the Urgus Mountains, the high-ranking water spirit Niranel was excitedly scouting for blossoms. Ernan followed, yelling at the spirit to behave. She turned to Berger and remarked that the spirit was excited because it had been a while since she was out, noting that Berger himself had been out continuously lately. Berger called her by name and, turning to her with a ferocious look, stated that he did not believe everything she had said was the truth. He demanded she tell him everything she was hiding. As the tension hung between them, the scene zoomed out to reveal someone in the distance spying on them through a telescope, whispering that he had finally found the Urgus Demon King. When Berger posed his ultimatum, Ernan struggled to find the words to respond. Sensing her hesitation, Berger stated that there was no helping the situation then. He released the energy he had been holding in his hand, blasting it toward the distant mountain where a spy was hiding. Though it was revealed to be a clone, he told Ernan that he would hear her out after he dealt with the nuisance. And in the distance, the man who had been spying screamed in realization that Berger had detected his concealment from such a great distance. The man's image began to flicker and shatter, revealing that the person Berger had struck was merely a clone. Berger, annoyed by the petty trick, wondered to himself why his enemies relied on such tactics. Ernan asked if that had been a hero, and Berger confirmed that the individual had been irritating him for some time. Ernan identified the spy as the 10-star hero, Dapner Filion, a mercenary who specialized in intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, and advanced cloning techniques. Upon hearing the name, Berger recalled that in his previous life, he had been told that much of his information had been leaked to that very person. He remarked that it was his first time seeing the hero this close. When Ernan expressed concern about whether the tower would be safe, Berger assured her it would be fine. The scene shifted to the Urgus Mountains, where the tower was located. Dapner Filion walked through the space, looking left and right with growing franticness, unable to understand why he could not see the tower he knew should be there. Unbeknownst to him, the tower had become invisible to human eyes. Berger explained to Ernan that he had activated the Mana Phantom remote control, which rendered the tower invisible at a cost of 10 demonic energy points per second. Berger noted that the function was also useful for avoiding the hero's journey, and as long as his energy points held, the tower would remain undiscovered. Returning to their conversation, Berger pressed Ernan to tell him everything she was hiding, warning that if she did not, he would no longer allow her into the tower. Ernan looked down, visibly uncomfortable, and finally offered to tell him the truth. She asked if he knew of a spell called the World Tree's Child. Elsewhere, Krutu, observing from the edge of the mountains, relayed to Berger that the hero had left the area without using further concealment, confirming that the spy had indeed been using clones. Berger instructed Krutu to find the remaining clones and eliminate them. Meanwhile, the constant drain of the invisibility spell weighed on Berger, who worried that the tower's location was close to being exposed. Ernan explained that Dapner must have been sent by her father to find her, and Berger deduced that, because she was the first princess, the king had no intention of giving up. Ernan agreed to tell her story, revealing that long ago the kingdom of Hildurin had been a powerful empire, but repeated warfare had reduced it to a mere kingdom. Her father wished to return to those glorious imperial days, but he believed that a single genius mage who could dominate the battlefield was more crucial than an army of 10,000. Since geniuses were not easily found, he had utilized the World Tree's Child spell to create enhanced humans. Berger was shocked to learn that Ernan was not a normal person, but a product of this spell. She explained that from the fetal stage, massive amounts of mana were forcibly injected into a child to create a magical genius. However, most fetuses and mothers could not withstand the process, leading to countless deaths, deformities, or short lives. She noted that only the successful cases were revealed to the public. Just then, a monster appeared nearby. Berger prepared to strike, but Ernan stepped in front of him, declaring that she was one of those successful cases, an overwhelmingly outstanding genius. The monster unleashed an energy blast at them, but Ernan used her high-ranking spirit's power to create a massive ice shield that blocked the attack. She then thrust the shield forward, transforming it into an ice strike that destroyed the creature in an instant. Berger walked toward her, impressed by a human defeating a top-tier monster in one blow. He questioned how she could claim she did not want to return to the kingdom when she possessed such power and stood closest to the throne. Ernan became shy and insisted she was telling the truth. She urged him to use the magic tool he had given to Hillen on her to prove her honesty. Berger explained that Larmani's orb shattered easily against a spirit's mana, making it impossible to use on a spiritualist. He demanded she speak her true intent, warning her that if she tried to deceive him again, he would show her the true power of a demon king. Frustrated that he doubted her, Ernan grabbed Berger's hand and pressed it against her chest. She told him to listen to her heartbeat, asserting that she had only told the truth. Berger felt a strange energy resonating with his new heart. Through the Phoenix's connection, he could sense her pulse and her raw emotions of anger, sorrow, and embarrassment. Ernan explained that this was the spirit's method of communication, allowing pure mana to sense vibrations and understand another's thoughts. Berger realized she was indeed telling the truth. Ernan then looked at him with heavy resolve and asked him to help her bring down her father and the kingdom of Hildurin. Berger was left speechless, the weight of her sincere request hanging in the air. After a long, awkward pause, Berger removed his hand from Ernan's chest and confirmed that he believed her. Ernan expressed her gratitude, but the moment was interrupted by the perverted spirit, Neronel, who arrived with her mouth watering, demanding to know what the two were doing and how they had become so close. She teased them, calling Ernan a sly little cat for acting innocent while alone. Ernan felt deeply uncomfortable, explaining that it was merely the spirit communication method, but Neronel countered by loudly declaring that such a method involved the body, not words, implying that Ernan had been the one to say all those strange things to Berger. Berger cut through the tension, telling Ernan that he understood her sincerity and that they would discuss the Hildurin kingdom further back at the tower. Ernan beamed at his response, and Berger instructed her to use the spirit to locate Dapner Filian's true body so they could capture him. Meanwhile, in the snowy ruins of the Urgest Mountains, Dapner Filian moved through the area using his doppelganger magic. This skill allowed him to create multiple clones that could self-divide. While the clones grew weaker as they multiplied, they allowed him to widen his search area significantly. Dapner monitored their movements from a hidden location, frustrated that he could not find the tower. He knew the tower should have a minimum height of 50 meters, and after calculating the path of the hero's journey and search times, he had pinpointed its location on his map. He stood in the exact spot, yet saw nothing but empty space. He was baffled, wondering how a demon king could be nearby while the tower remained invisible. Suddenly, one of his clones was destroyed, followed quickly by others across the mountain. Krutu stood nearby with his men, axe in hand, confirming to Berger that he had destroyed the doppelgangers. He He reported that the 10-star hero's clones were not particularly strong. Berger ordered him to continue destroying anything he saw, thinking to himself that once the clones were disposed of, he would capture Dapner and turn him into a vessel to control the continent. However, Gordon suddenly called through their communication link to report an abnormality. The Mana Phantom was overheating and acting as if it were about to explode. The tower's prolonged invisibility had caused a system overload, and the cost of maintaining the spell had skyrocketed to 100 points per second. Berger realized in shock that he had less than 10 minutes before his remaining demonic energy, over 49,000 points, was depleted. If he failed to capture Dapner before then, the tower's location would be exposed to the hero's journey. Dapner, unaware of the technical struggle, remained frantic, convinced his calculations were correct. As the remaining doppelgangers were systematically eliminated, Berger urged Krutu to search the area thoroughly. Berger used the map to track the destruction of the clones, deducing that the true body must be located in the center of the destroyed decoys. The tension was palpable for both Dapner and Berger, with both of them literally fighting against time. Just then, Narinel discovered Dapner hiding in a cage. As she and Dapner locked eyes, she screamed that she had found the true body and instantly sealed the entrance with a spell. Dapner attempted to use his shadow spell to slip away, and Narinel shrieked that he was fleeing. Berger ordered Ernan to track him, and she fired a magical signal into the air. Berger flew toward the location and arrived just in time. In that moment, watching as flaming feathers fell from the sky, increasing the brightness of the area, he landed directly in front of Dapner, offering him a choice: obey the Demon King or die. Dapner stared at him in horror, realizing that the presence of both Berger and the Phoenix, combined with the knowledge that Phile, the Phoenix Master, must be the Demon King himself, was quickly deduced by Dapner at a single glance. He realized the Spirit and the Imperial Princess were also working for the Demon King. Refusing to obey, Dapner attempted to create more doppelgangers to escape, but he faltered as he recognized the overwhelming power building in front of him. Berger, looking annoyed, called Dapner a fool and warned him that he had been given a choice. A massive surge of fire and demonic energy formed above Dapner and his clones, leaving them cowering in fear. Berger commanded the 10-star hero to disappear, and the attack descended. Dapner thought in despair that he had underestimated the power of a Demon King who had descended less than a year ago. In that moment, he reflected that regardless of financial gain, he should have abandoned this pursuit long ago. Suddenly, a strange dark energy began to emanate from the cage where Narinel had attempted to seal Dapner. Completely hidden from the awareness of others, the energy seeped through, and simultaneously, a massive explosion violently shook the entire space. In the confusion, the energy morphed into a crow, flying swiftly far away from the Urgest Mountains with a scroll. The scene shifted to the massive castle within the kingdom of Hilderan. The crow arrived with the scroll, delivering it directly to one of the subordinates of the king. At that exact moment, he entered the assembly of the king and his advisors to deliver the message. He announced to the sovereign that a letter from Dapner Filion had just arrived at the information bureau of the kingdom. Upon receiving this news, the king questioned the subordinate, demanding to know if the individual had discovered the location of the Berger Tower. The king, delighted that Dapner had found the coordinates, was interrupted when the advisor noticed the mana bird that had delivered the letter burning away in black flames. The king realized that the bird's sudden death meant Dapner's true body had been killed by the Demon King. Enraged, he struck his chair and declared that they had severely underestimated the new Demon King. He ordered his subordinates to contact the Heroes Guild immediately, demanding the assembly of all 10-star heroes for a new expedition to kill the Greenhorn Demon King and retrieve the Imperial Princess. After the massive explosion, Berger lay on the ground, breathing heavily from the exhaustion of using such a massive skill. He knew that while the power of the Phoenix was beyond imagination, the resulting fatigue was unbearable. He drifted toward unconsciousness, but Ernan was there to catch him, asking if he was all right. Her knees were burnt and her clothing was damaged, but she insisted she was fine, as the Spirit of Water specialized in recovery. She smiled at Berger with hope, noting that he disliked showing weakness because the Pole Orcs might be watching. Berger decided to take a short nap, and Ernan told him not to worry. The scene shifted to a different space where news of the succubus invasion of the royal palace was causing anxiety, with voices calling for all Demon Kings to be hunted. Jason watched as Vivian Blunt, the queen of the Blood Moon tribe, sipped her wine, unbothered. She remarked that heroes were merely prey for them. She sipped more of her wine, muttering that her subordinates encountering a hero in the royal palace was simply a stroke of bad luck. Jason paused for a second and sighed, openly regretting that the Archduke would send such a scatterbrained nympho to Aurene. This caused Vivian to scream at him. demanding that he correct himself right away. She stood on top of the table in annoyance, declaring that she was the succubus queen, and not just any nympho, but the ultimate nympho. To her, it was entirely a matter of pride. Jason glared at her for a moment before laughing. He asked Vivian how many heroes she thought existed in a single dimension. She replied that there were about 10 in the dimension she had previously conquered. Guessing about the current situation, she asked if there were roughly 50 heroes in Arene, wondering how many there actually were since people claimed there were so many. She could not understand why he was making such a fuss over a mere 50 heroes. Jason countered by asking if she truly had not heard anything from the Archduke, noting that if she had been properly informed, she never would have agreed to come to this dimension. He then revealed that there were actually 4,732 heroes residing in Arene, citing that as the official number of registered individuals in the Hero Guild. The news shocked Vivian deeply, making her visibly uncomfortable. She told Jason that he had to be joking, insisting there was a limit to such pranks because it was impossible for that many heroes to exist in one dimension. Jason explained that if Arene were a dimension with normal limits, the previous Demon Kings would have conquered it long ago. He added that encountering a hero in this region was not a matter of bad luck, but a daily occurrence. Vivian grew incredibly uneasy, choking on her words as she stammered that it could not be true because of what the Archduke had promised her. The memory of her conversation with the Archduke, from before her arrival in Arene, then came to mind. The Demon King had told her that conquering Arene would not be difficult given her reputation as a Demon King who had conquered a dimension already and a queen of a race. He promised her the position of the next Archduke if she completed the conquest. However, he also instructed her to keep a close eye on Berger. The Archduke concluded by stating he was looking forward to her success, and asked her not to disappoint him, an order that she had confidently affirmed at the time. Jason correctly guessed these secrets, noting that he often used such individuals as disposable informants before throwing them away. He suddenly slammed Vivian face down onto the table with immense force. He sternly warned her that she had been abandoned and commanded her to stop thinking and only follow his orders. Shaken by his power, she could only agree. Later, Jason sat alone, reviewing reports. Dabnir Filion, a 10-star hero, was dead, and Wharton had been selected as his replacement. The location of the tower in the Urgest Mountains had been revealed to the world, and the Heroes Guild was pledging full support for a conquest. Jason feared the world was trembling in fear, which was not the result he wanted. He decided he could manipulate Vivian, but Berger Deus, the arrogant black flame dragon, was a problem he now had to deal with directly. Meanwhile, Berger, in his foul disguise, lay on a bed in Ernan's quarters on the 4th floor of his tower. Ernan offered him soup, and Berger asked how they had managed to enter the tower without being caught. Ernan explained that while Gordon was away, she had snuck in through a 5th-floor window, and they had been inside for less than 10 minutes. Berger noted that despite his extreme exhaustion, he felt power surging through him. Naranel, the high-ranking spirit, revealed she had shared her mana with him, allowing his body to absorb it, a unique case she had never seen before. She privately thrilled at the memory of Berger touching her chest and hugging her. Ernan's rescue strangely brought embarrassment to Berger, and so Berger insisted this be kept a secret to maintain his leadership, and Ernan agreed, provided he granted her one wish later. Gordon then contacted Berger, screaming that there was a problem. Berger asked Gordon what the issue could possibly be, and Gordon explained that the Hilderin Kingdom claimed to have located their tower and was already preparing to initiate the hero's journey once more. Shocked by the news, Berger listened as Gordon revealed that a newspaper article had been sent over by Hill and Cargill. Upon reading the article, Berger discovered that Daphne Phelan, as a final mission before death, had exposed the location of the Berger Tower. Berger knew that this dimension lacked the communication magic common in the demonic realm. At best, people relied on carrier pigeons. He had attacked with the strict intention of destroying the doppelganger and wiping out any possible chance of information leaks. He began to wonder if the information had been sent from another location before their initial encounter. Distraught, he found a small silver lining. At least the fact that he was a Phoenix Master had not been reported. While Gordon continued interpreting the situation, he informed Berger that this specific hero's journey would be launched on the largest scale in history. The preparations were expected to take at least 6 months. The 6-month timeline weighed heavily on Berger. The tower's location was compromised. If the kingdom deployed multiple 10-star heroes, simple tricks would no longer work. Neither an avalanche nor a monster lure would inflict any meaningful damage. In exactly 6 months, hundreds of heroes would arrive at the tower in flawless condition. Berger began to fear that he would die again, toyed with just as he had been in his past life. Annoyed and desperate, he pondered heavily for a way to overcome the impending disaster. As Berger evaluated his options, Ernan called out to him, grabbing his hand and claiming she knew a way out. She explained that it was a method only the Dark Spiritualist, one of the Demon King's capable subordinates, could execute. The childish title confused Berger, but he looked at her softly and smiled. The ridiculous naming actually broke his anxiety, causing his tension to melt away. He told her he was sorry for causing unnecessary worry, and suggested they immediately proceed with the strategy meeting. Internalizing his resolve, Berger vowed that he would not crumble before securing his revenge against the heroes who had toyed with him and killed him in his previous life. Then, Ernan glared back at him, beaming with absolute certainty. She stated that the only way to halt the Heldren hero's journey was to kidnap her younger sister, Elena. The bizarre suggestion left Berger completely stunned, leaving him to question what she could possibly mean and how such an action could ever help their situation. Ernan gripped Berger's hand with intensity, urging him to save Elena to halt the hero's journey. Berger glared at her, recalling that Elena, the 13th princess of Hilderan, was the very hostage he had originally intended to kidnap himself. Ernan confirmed her identity, explaining that though they had different mothers, they were as close as true sisters. She expressed deep worry, noting that the newspaper reported Elena had been kidnapped by the Dragon King of Absolute Hardness. Berger scoffed, noting that other demon kings did not treat hostages as leniently as he did, but Ernan pressed on, reiterating the dangers of the magic used to forcibly increase mana sensitivity. She explained that Elena had been one of the subjects, but unlike her, Elena suffered the side effect of a frail body. Because of this, she was restricted from going outside and could never learn magic. Ernan argued that if Elena were moved to Berger's tower, where mana was scarce, she could be taught to control her sensitivity and become a formidable force. Berger mused that gaining another ally with Ernan's potential would be beneficial, though he retorted that a demon king rescuing a princess sounded like the work of a hero. Ernan, winking, suggested they simply force the hero to do it for them. Berger, realizing they had no time to argue, contacted Gordon and ordered him to tell Helen Cargill to organize a hero's journey to rescue the 13th princess. Gordon was stunned by the order, struggling to process the idea of rescuing another princess. The scene moved to the Tower of Absolute Hardness, where the Demon King Ugar sat upon his throne. When Berger and Gordon arrived, Ugar mockingly asked if they had come to beg for help after insulting the Demon King standards. Berger calmly leaped into the air and informed Ugar that a hero's journey was targeting his tower. He proposed that if Ugar placed the kidnapped 13th princess on the first floor, the heroes would simply rescue her and leave without further conflict. Ugar dismissed the news, claiming he had heard nothing of a new hero's journey. Berger countered that this merely highlighted the limits of the Titan's intelligence network. Annoyed, Ugar grew to a massive size using his Titan magic, calling Berger a trashy piece of work. Berger remained unfazed, calmly listing other princes and princesses that Ugar could potentially kidnap in the future. The 3rd Prince of Guyana, the 7th Princess of the Velos Dukedom, the 4th Prince of Makil, and the 6th Princess of Candaria. Ugar stopped dead in his tracks. Berger explained that those individuals were either removed from their lines of succession or lacked the resources to launch a hero's journey, meaning kidnapping them was useless. Ugar, who had been considering targeting those exact royals, was struck by how Berger knew this. Berger ignored his questions, focusing on the tactical necessity of protecting Ugar's tower. When Ugar asked why Berger would help him, Berger smiled, knowing Ugar had taken the bait. Berger reflected on the situation, realizing that in this dimension, one could not withstand the sheer volume of heroes through brute force alone. Ugar likely felt this truth deeply, and because he lacked the intellect to stop the heroes, he trembled in fear every time. By kidnapping only those who would not trigger a response, Ugar was acting no differently than he did before Berger's regression. Berger knew that this foolish, giant coward would soon try to cling to Jason Cockmond, the man destined to become a ray of light for him, just to survive. Berger stated aloud that he wanted nothing in return, adding that a great demon simply deserved to live longer. Stunned by this apparent generosity, Ugar watched as Berger walked away. Berger resolved to step into that protective role himself, thereby bringing Ugar to his side and neutralizing one of Jason's key pieces. The scene transitioned to the Golden Moon Merchant Guild base, where File arrived through a teleportation circle. File noted that Ugar's side was settled, leaving Helen Cargill's side next. He asked the gathered group if preparations for the hero's journey were complete. Helen confirmed that they were ready to depart at any time. Rosal Chart chimed in, stating that she had taken charge of the tower raid map since she had climbed the Tower of Absolute Hardness multiple times. The vice-captain of the Scarlet Hawk Mercenary Guild added that their members were fully assembled and ready to demonstrate the true power of their guild. Berger deemed the force sufficient, noting they only needed to reach the first floor, Turning to Granada of the Maple Tribe and Amon Katrushu, Berger inquired about the status of the elf slaves. Amon reported that there were 33 elves in total, including 12 slaves rescued from across the continent. Granada added that every single one of them had willingly sworn loyalty to him. Jettison smiled and pointed out that the elves would not have even been able to bargain without his assistance. Acknowledging the effort, Berger tossed some coins to Jettisons, thanked the group, and announced that the hero's journey to rescue the 13th princess of the Hilderan Kingdom would depart immediately. The group affirmed his orders. Later, inside the underground warehouse of the Golden Moon Merchant Guild, Berger stood alongside Granada. Berger sought reconfirmation that the elves had sworn loyalty, and Granada affirmed that they had sworn upon the World Tree. The gathered elves expressed enthusiastic gratitude, stating that since Granada had saved them from a lifetime of disgrace, they could only find peace by showing their appreciation. One elf added that serving the great Granada was a distinct honor. Berger smiled and congratulated them on becoming vessels for the Demon King of Blazing Fire. The elves recoiled in shock, echoing the word demon in disbelief. Berger wondered why elves always reacted the same way to his identity. But Granada injected, questioning what kind of demon king wandered around open society as he did. The elves turned on Granada, demanding an explanation. Granada apologized for the deception, explaining that he had sworn loyalty to the Demon King upon the World Tree, meaning their loyalty to him naturally extended to the Demon King. The elves cried out, accusing him of betraying the World Tree. Granada explained that his choices were driven by a desire for revenge against the humans, as he could never forget the disgrace he had suffered. The word revenge resonated deeply with the elves. They recalled their own past traumas, being tortured, ruined, stripped and humiliated inside cages. Realizing the motive behind Granada's actions, their expressions hardened with resolve, and they voiced their absolute support for the cause against humanity. Observing the shift in their energy, Berger reflected on how even pure elves could fall so low after experiencing the ugliness of humanity. He contacted Gordon, instructing him to take the information on the elves and establish a route to infiltrate them into human society, which Gordon accepted. Berger calculated that there were 6 months left before the heroes of the 10 stars would gather in one place to eliminate him. Until then, his priority was to recruit new talent to strengthen the tower and expand his influence. Creating chaos within human society to delay the heroes was a vital part of that strategy. With only 6 months remaining until the ultimate confrontation, Berger resolved that he would survive no matter what. The scene cuts back to the Tower of Absolute Hardness. Inside the first floor, the majority of the monsters had been laid waste by the heroes who had come to infiltrate the tower. The infiltrators spoke among themselves, boasting that the tower was not much trouble after all. Just then, at the extreme edge of the floor, someone screamed out to Helen, announcing that they had found her. The group turned their heads in shock toward the voice. It was Elena. Helen ran over to where the princess lay on the floor, nearly unconscious. Helen ordered the group to head back now that the princess was found, offering to take the rear guard while the others carried her out. In that moment, Gozelle questioned why the Demon King of Absolute Hardness would leave a hostage on the first floor. Helen was taken aback by her curiosity, but Roselle continued, noting that it seemed as though the Archduke was actively inviting them to take her without making a fuss. Helen smiled and suggested that, as the others said, the Archduke might simply be scared of them. He noted it was a good thing their members took little damage, and reiterated that since the princess was safe, they should return for now. Sensing something amiss, she told Helen that he was acting strange. When Helen questioned her, she explained that he seemed to have changed from his days in the assault unit. She remembered how stuck up he used to be, recalling that he would have previously demanded to march straight up to the Archduke's room for the sake of his own popularity. Now, however, he seemed far more mellow and composed. Helen was taken aback by her words. He chuckled and claimed it must be her imagination, though he secretly wondered to himself if he looked too relaxed, because Berger had already shared the entire plan with him. Roselle smiled back, deciding that, whether she was overthinking it or not, the change was a positive one. The scene shifts to a different location within the Hilderan Kingdom, where a grand celebration was underway. A magnificent banquet was being held in the Grand Banquet Hall, and everyone was enjoying themselves. The king addressed the crowd, stating that if the prestige of the Hilderan royal family were to be tarnished, the morale of the future hero's journey would drop. He then called out to Helen, commending his hard work and declaring that the man who prevented such a disaster in the name of the king was truly the hero of Hilderan. Helen was humble, though. He credited the success of the mission entirely to the help of Roselle, which took Roselle by surprise. Helen added that he was able to finish the task without any trouble because of her. The king praised Hillen for his humility, calling him an example to everyone. Hillen bowed his head, expressing that he was overwhelmed by the praise. Hillen then questioned the king regarding the absence of Princess Elena. The king reassured him that she was resting in her room under tightened security, so her safety was guaranteed. Hillen acknowledged this, satisfied that there was no problem. Privately, the king noted Hillen's unusual interest in the princess. He began to scheme, thinking that if he married the two, Hillen would belong entirely to the Hildren royal family, making the princess far more useful than he had initially anticipated. Excited by this prospect, the king raised his glass to the room and ordered everyone to raise theirs in honor of Hillen, the hero who had devastated the atrocious tower and rescued the lovely princess. He urged everyone to enjoy the night to their heart's content, declaring that no one shall look down upon Hildren, and that the kingdom stands right beneath the heavens and shall forever prosper. The crowd cheered and chanted, wishing a long life to the king. Outside the Hildren kingdom, a figure moved swiftly across the terrain, finally landing at the Annex Tower, a castle separated from the main palace. The arrival revealed one of the low-level spirits controlled by Ernan. Ernan suddenly appeared alongside Berger and noted that since all the heroes capable of sensing demonic energy were enjoying the party at the castle, this was their chance. Berger used his skills to instantly take down the guards stationed to protect Elena. He advised Ernan to save her strength, warning that if she increased her spiritual output, even the heroes far away might notice. The tower was completely compromised from the inside. From high above, someone screamed a warning about intruders. Instantly, Ernan used one of her spirits to attack. The spirit expanded heavily and sucked in all the guards who were around that space, rendering them immobile. The leader of the guards began to scream as he questioned who was causing the mayhem. Ernan proudly announced that she was a dark spiritualist and one of the 4 heavenly kings serving the Demon King. Berger silently watched her, amused and wondering if she had allowed herself to be kidnapped just to engage in this dark spiritualist cosplay. Before Ernan could finish introducing Berger as being from the Urgest Mountains, Berger jumped into the air, grumbling that being looked down upon was annoying and that they should finish this quickly. Ernan cried out, complaining that she was still introducing him. The guards panicked, realizing a demon king and one of the 4 heavenly kings had come to kidnap the princess through the front gates. Berger landed softly, pointing out the powerful defensive divination magic cast on the window. The area fell into chaos as the guards rushed him. The leader shouted to his men that Berger could not use demonic energy at the moment without alerting the heroes, ordering them to strike all at once to show him the terror of the Hildren guards. Berger acknowledged that using demonic energy would indeed be a pain if the heroes noticed, but mocked the guards for believing they could handle him at their measly level. In an instant, Berger wiped them all out. The entire tower shook from the impact, catching the attention of the princess inside her room. Berger stood proud, noting that he had controlled his strength to keep the tower from collapsing. Turning to the lone remaining leader, Berger remarked that only he was left. The leader realized the royal family's best guards were no match for a demon king. In a desperate move, the leader swung his weapon heavily against the wall to carve an escape route and retreated through the breach, planning to call the heroes. However, as he leaped out, a force resembling gravity magic pulled him back. The displaced stones returned to their original positions, trapping the leader securely inside the wall. Ernan smiled and apologized for the trick as she followed Berger upstairs. Berger mused to Ernan about how much the kingdom's prestige would plummet if the princess was taken again, less than a day after being rescued. Smiling, Berger opened the door to Elena's room, announcing that he had come to get her. He was immediately shocked by what happened next. Elena suddenly ran out of the room and bypassed Berger entirely, shouting Ernan's name. Ernan called out to Elena in return, and the two happily hugged, celebrating their reunion. Berger stood by watching them, confused. Berger asked Elena how she recognized Ernan despite the disguise, and Elena revealed she had read the letters Ernan sent. She knew only Ernan would accompany the Demon King. Berger asked if she meant the letters given to Hillen. When Ernan asked if he already knew about them, Berger confirmed that since it happened in his tower, he was fully aware. He had ordered Hillen to open them and was not worried about the contents. Transforming his appearance, Berger declared it was time to head back, and the group vanished from the tower instantly. Much later within the Hildren kingdom, an advisor rushed to the king to report that the princess had been taken once more by the forces of the demon realm. Upon hearing the rundown of the event, the king dropped his glass, spilling wine across the ground. He screamed furiously at his guards, calling them idiots, and raging over how she could be kidnapped again so quickly. His echoes reverberated through the castle as he canceled the banquet, demanding to know how anyone dared to mock Hilderin. The king roared in fury, entirely unaware of just how much Berger truly looked down upon them. The scene transitioned to the first floor of the Tower of Flames. Ernan and Elena stood beside Gordon, watching him work. Elena looked on with excitement and remarked that it was her first time seeing such a large and uniquely shaped manor cannon, asking Lodger if he had crafted it himself. Lodger smiled and replied that since the Demon King had brought her there, she must be a princess from somewhere, noting that she certainly had an eye for weapons. He proudly introduced himself as the blacksmith of the first floor, the great Lodger Friedrich. Elena eagerly asked if she could try making one later, which made Lodger laugh with excitement. He boldly appointed her as his assistant at any time, causing her to cheer in happiness. Just then, Kate walked into the room and asked Lodger to repair the practice scarecrow. Noticing the newcomer, Katie questioned who she was. Elena gasped, admiring how pretty the knight was, and noted that she could tell Katie had a solid body even through the armor. Katie became shocked and flustered. She ran over to Ernan, whispering that the child was dangerously good at socializing. Ernan laughed, explaining that Elena was her younger sister and was simply being sincere. Ernan explained to Katie that ever since Elena was born, she had spent most of her time lying in bed in her room, studying the world only through books. Now that she was finally experiencing it in person, she was not the type of child to be dishonest, just to look good to others. Hearing this, Katie blushed, wondering if she truly was that pretty. Gordon then turned to Berger and protested, stating that having dwarves, elves, heroes, and princess knights in the tower was one thing, but bringing a child into the Demon King's tower was strange. Elena walked up to him and asked if he was the adjutant, which paused Gordon in his speech. Turning his attention to her, Gordon told her not to talk to him, adding that if word got out that the Demon King was raising a brat, the dignity of the Demon King, who must remain an object of fear, would be tarnished. He declared there was no place for her in the tower. Elena, however, bowed her head and thanked him for always helping her sister, mentioning she had heard that he managed the tower, prepared delicious meals, and worked the hardest behind the scenes. Validated by her words, Gordon paused, turned away, and began to quiver, muttering that it was nothing. Elena then ran back to her sister, expressing that the Demon King's tower suited her perfectly. Because there were no scary monsters, it was clean, everyone was kind, and her body no longer hurt. Ernan shared in her excitement. Watching this, Berger noted to himself that everyone already liked the girl, which was fortunate. He wondered what kind of sweet talk she might use to charm him, but Ernan assured Berger that Elena truly meant what she said. Berger then asked Elena what Ernan had written about him in her letters. Elena hesitated and covered her mouth, looking at her sister. It appeared that Ernan had completely omitted Berger's name from the letters, or maybe she did include it, and it was something more 18+. Either way, the topic caused both Ernan and Elena to blush heavily. Elena quickly ran behind Ernan, claiming she didn't know anything, leaving Berger confused. Turning his attention back to business, Berger asked Ernan how the princess was able to move so freely, given that she was supposed to be too sick to even get up. Ernan credited the Demon King's tower, explaining that Elena suffered from mana overload. Her innate amount of mana was as massive as Ernan's, but her body was too weak to handle it. However, high concentrations of demonic energy deplete mana, just as a spirit blossom loses its mana when contaminated. The reason she constantly coughed in the kingdom was that her mana was only depleted when inside a tower. Ernan confirmed that if Elena remained there, she could make a full recovery. Elena ran off happily to play near the edge of the room. Berger looked back at Ernan and noted that the heroes of the 10 stars would arrive in 6 months, asking if she could have Elena ready by then. Ernan replied that reaching a full archmage level might be difficult, but raising her to an upper-level mage would be no problem. Berger walked off, deciding that would be enough, and that he would station the princess on the 3rd floor. He instructed Ernan to take care of her. Ernan then requested that Elena not participate directly in combat, as she was still too young to see blood. Berger wondered if the reason Ernan wanted to destroy Hilderin was because of that child. He told her to raise the girl well so that he could accommodate the request. The scene shifted to the strategy meeting room on the 5th floor of the Tower of Flames. As Berger and Gordon walked into the massive space, Gordon remarked on its size. Berger explained that he had expanded it using the points gained from kidnapping the princess, adding that he had been handling business from the throne due to a lack of luxury until now. Placing his hand on the table, a massive globe of the entire world appeared before them. Berger stated that to face the heroes of the 10 stars in the future, they needed to create an organized system. They sat down, and Berger delegated the management authority of the room to Gordon, allowing him to expand the spaces at his discretion in the future. Gordon affirmed the instructions. Berger calculated that two things were required to stably block the hero's journey: strengthening the tower and delaying the time it took for the heroes of the 10 stars to gather. Berger asked about the plan to spread the elves. Gordon reported that it was proceeding smoothly across the continent through the Golden Moon Merchant Guild. Before he could finish, Krutu spoke through a communication device, alerting the Demon King that there was a problem. The scene cut to the Akan Kingdom, where advisors were gathered in a panic over the disappearance of the princess. A letter found in her room revealed that Princess Lavinia had left to gather chimera ingredients. The king realized that the only cold mountain the princess had not yet visited was the Urgist Mountains. He immediately ordered a search party to Urgist to bring Lavinia back safely. In the Urgist Mountains, a mutated beast-like creature was laying waste to local monsters. Princess Lavinia was controlling the creature, searching specifically for orc ingredients. Nearby, Krutu spotted her from a corner. Back in the tower, Krutu explained to Berger via the communication device that a human mage leading an army had invaded their tribe's territory and was approaching the tower. Though they were surrounding her, stopping her was proving difficult. Looking at the transmission, Berger recognized her as Lavinia Akan. Gordon questioned her significance, noting she was a chimera creator, but pointing out that such creators were common even in the demonic realm. Berger, remembering the timeline before his regression, knew she was on a completely different level. He recalled how she had single-handedly led a chimera army, invaded his tower, and kidnapped almost all of his vassals, nearly causing the tower to collapse. That strength had earned Lavinia the nickname of the Solo Hero's Journeyer. Berger realized her full-scale activity should not have started for another 3 years. Wondering if killing Draxon had accelerated her timeline, Berger warned Gordon that Lavinia would never stop until she obtained her ingredients, being a princess who would even target the Demon King's flesh if unsatisfied. Gordon warned that since she was high in the line of succession for the Akan Kingdom, killing or kidnapping her would provoke their entire army to invade. He added that dealing with the Hildren hero's journey was already overwhelming, and facing the Akan Kingdom as well would guarantee defeat. Berger instructed Krutu to lure her far away from the tower, strictly forbidding a full-scale battle. Krutu affirmed the command. Berger then told Gordon to assist from the strategy room, which Gordon understood. As Berger walked away, he pondered the striking similarities between this situation and the events right before Draxon died, back when the dwarf princess had been sent toward Draxon. A lingering thought remained in his mind. He wondered if someone had intentionally sent Lavinia to harm him. The moment Berger realized this fact, he immediately flew out of the castle and moved through the Urgist Mountains. He contacted Krutu and ordered him to retreat to the east for now, which Krutu affirmed. Berger began to think to himself that Lavinia wouldn't have come here without any information. There must be a mastermind who lured her, and the only person he could think of was Jason. If Jason truly was the mastermind, Berger knew he wouldn't just sit back and accept being at a disadvantage. He flew swiftly toward Lavinia's location. Upon arriving, Berger saw that Lavinia and her chimeras had already taken down Krutu, who was bleeding heavily. Krutu spoke to them, expressing relief that his subordinates had escaped safely, believing that even without him, the tribe would last forever since everyone else was safe. He took a firm stance and screamed at the chimeras, declaring that his life was a small price to pay as long as he could protect his tribe. In that moment, he apologized to Berger within his mind. As the 3 chimeras suddenly leaped to attack him, Krutu silently pleaded for the Demon King, Berger, to look after his tribe. In a swift second, a massive purple flame descended from the skies and incinerated the chimeras standing in front of Krutu. Krutu was extremely shocked as he stared at the black flames before him. Berger appeared and asked Krutu if he had ordered him to die. Krutu glared at him in shock, realizing the Demon King was there. Berger questioned who gave him permission to die, prompting Krutu to kneel and apologize, stating he would accept any punishment. Berger told him to raise his head, adding that he had fulfilled his responsibility and should not throw his life away so easily, as subordinates like him were hard to find. Krutu began to tear up at those words. In front of them, Lavinia was surprised to see the Demon King. Berger turned to Krutu and noted that this worked out well, as the Chimera army was dangerous, and it was better to thin their numbers even a little right now. Suddenly, someone screamed for their sister. Lavinia turned her head toward the voice, hearing someone call out that her father was worried about her. People were calling out for the princess. Berger wondered if they had come to find Lavinia. At a far distance, a man screamed that he saw chimeras beyond the blizzard and that his sister must be there. This man was Cain, the 5th prince of the Akan Kingdom. Berger told Krutu that he had no intention of making an enemy of the Akan Kingdom, but warned that next time, none of them would be spared. Upon saying that, he used his black flames to cover the entire space, and suddenly disappeared in a swift second. The chimeras moved forward, leaving Lavinia to wonder how the Demon King had vanished. The scene then shifted to Prince Cain running toward his sister, calling out to her and saying the light came from their location. The moment the search party arrived, all they found was the leftover of a strange-looking machine. The machine held a note that read, "Cain, don't look for me." The prince became very angry, questioning why his sister disappeared like this every time. One of his subordinates advised that they had come too deep and should head back before encountering dangerous monsters. Cain agreed, noting there was no way she would be defeated by monsters, and having confirmed she wasn't kidnapped by the Demon King of Blazing Fire, he ordered the group to head back. The scene shifted back to the Berger Tower. Lavinia appeared there with her chimera, realizing the position of the structure. Berger stood at the window of his tower, looking down and thinking to himself that Lavinia wouldn't go back until she obtained what she wanted. He felt that was exactly to be expected, since she was a mad woman who had even aimed for the Demon King's flesh with that obsession before his regression. Just then, Gordon called out to Berger and informed him that the Akan scouts had left Urgist. Berger asked if she had descended the mountains separately after meeting the prince, but then answered his own question, realizing she was a human obsessed with chimera materials and must have shaken off the search party on purpose. Berger noted that if they knew the princess was heading for the tower, the search party would have come there too. Gordon replied that, given the circumstances, the chimera princess might disappear forever in the dangerous Urgist Mountains. Berger laughed, noting that the Akan kingdom would have no justification to invade by using him as the culprit. Gordon laughed as well, and suggested launching an all-out attack right now. Berger pondered the idea from Gordon, thinking this was truly the only chance to deal with her. However, he felt a nagging sense of unease. Deciding against a full assault, he resolved to deal with her himself. He flew outside of his tower, landing right in front of Lavinia as she looked upward at him. From within the hair of the chimera creature, strange-looking small eyes were watching him. These eyes were connected to Jason, revealing that Berger's hunch was correct. Jason was surprised, wondering if Berger had come out himself instead of hiding inside the tower, noting he was more cautious than anticipated. Berger glared at Lavinia and stated he knew Jason was listening. Jason was shocked by the words. Berger explained that he could feel a faint trace of Jason's energy from the chimera, which became clear now that he was seeing it up close. He asked if Jason had provided a body containing his demonic energy as material for her. Jason responded, acknowledging it was impressive that Berger noticed. He smiled and added that even if Berger knew, there was little he could do in front of a chimera army, which was much more powerful compared to a hero's vanguard. Berger seemed to be at a disadvantageous position. He recognized that there were many chimeras, and each one was at the level of a high-ranking monster. He began to imbue demonic energy into his hand, thinking that even so, he could succeed if he could just catch Lavinia. However, he suddenly realized that the chimera held another fused energy besides Jason's. Gordon called out to him, sharing information just received from Hill and Cargill. The corpse of the deceased beast Demon King, discovered by the 10-star hero Roselle, was said to have passed into the hands of Lavinia. In that moment, Berger realized that the very chimera Lavinia was riding was actually the corpse of Draxon, the Demon King of Beasts. The look in the chimera's eye appeared to be seeking revenge. Berger wondered how even Draxon's corpse could be used as material. From the other end, Jason smiled heavily. He thought about how the creature could replicate the speed Draxon had in life, albeit only for a moment. He knew a Demon King strengthens their power with demonic energy points, but Berger had converted most of those points into money. For the current Berger, who hadn't been strengthened at all, defeating that chimera and Princess Lavinia would not be easy. Jason had placed eyes and ears on several other chimeras around as well. While they played tag with Lavinia, if even one of them entered the tower, he could grasp the internal situation and deal with them. Jason established a perfect strategy for the conquest of the Berger Tower. He smiled and wondered what the Demon King of Blazing Flames would do now. Berger suddenly began to laugh, admitting to himself that he had been completely played by Jason. He realized that, just like with Draxon, once the battle started, there would be no turning back. He released his demonic energy, letting it fade away in his hand. Placing his hand on his chest, he resolved that since it had come to this, it was all or nothing. Suddenly, he took off his jacket, landed on the ground, and called out to Lavinia. This action surprised both Gordon and Jason. Gordon screamed loudly, warning the Demon King that it was dangerous to reveal himself in front of those chimeras. Jason was taken aback, wondering what Berger was trying to do. Berger stood directly in front of the chimeras and Lavinia. He called out to her and proposed a deal. She questioned what he meant, and Berger offered to give her one of his horns if she canceled her deal with the Demon King of Lies. He swore the offer on the Demon King's standards. Upon hearing this, Lavinia began to drool at the prospect of using his horn for one of her future experiments. Lavinia was highly receptive to the proposal, and immediately presented a contract for him to sign. Though taken aback by her swiftness, Berger accepted the terms regardless. Later, after Lavinia canceled her summon, she insistently demanded the horn. Berger deflected, noting that the location lacked dignity, and suggested they move inside his tower first. This irritated Lavinia, but Berger reassured her that a formal contract was unnecessary since he had already sworn upon the Demon King's standards. Despite her glaring resentment, she followed him into the tower. Observing this unfold, Jason smiled to himself. He found it amusing that Berger, someone who considered the standards to be absolute garbage, would use them to swear an oath. Jason was surprised the tactic actually worked on Lavinia, noting that Berger was becoming more troublesome than he had anticipated. Still, keeping his next move in mind, Jason resolved to see how long Berger could hold out. Inside the tower, Lodger, Kaid, Ernan, and Elena were all visibly shocked to see Lavinia walking past them in Berger's company. Observing the lack of crafting components, Lavinia questioned where the materials were, as she had expected to see some monsters in the Demon King's castle. Berger replied that he had never promised to provide conventional materials. As the pair passed by, Katie quietly asked Ernan if her eyes were playing tricks on her. Ernan confirmed that the woman was undoubtedly Princess Lavinia, leading Elena to question what brought her to the tower. Lodger remarked that the reason ought to be obvious. On the 5th floor of the Tower of Flames, within the Demon King's chambers, Berger presented Lavinia with a massive horn. Lavinia examined it and became furious, stating it was not the promised horn of the Demon King. Berger smiled, indifferently stating that he cared nothing for the Demon King's standards and could not surrender his true horn to a human, as it represented the pride of a black flame dragon. Screaming in rage, Lavinia called Berger a liar and ordered him to die. Her summons materialized instantly, prepared to launch an attack. But just then, Gordon entered the chamber, warning Berger of the danger, but Berger dismissed the concern. He urged Lavinia to calm down, explaining that while the horn was not his own, he had infused it with a phoenix's flame, a power comparable to that of a demon king. Recognizing the energy, Lavinia was stunned. Berger added that it would serve as a perfect material for a chimera. Satisfied, Lavinia dismissed her chimeras back into her portal. She then extended her hand, greedily demanding even more materials. Gordon was glad she approved of the item. Smiling, Berger stated he could no longer provide resources for free. He produced Larmani's orb, informing her that she would need to consume it to bind her mind. Without hesitation, Lavinia snatched the orb and shoved it into her mouth, frantically demanding more flames. The artifact instantly transformed her into a Demon King's vassal. Though taken aback by her unstable behavior, Berger confirmed his compliance. With Lavinia successfully integrated as a vassal, she began socializing with his other accomplices in the tower. Berger reflected that he finally possessed a force capable of matching the massive numbers of the hero's journey, leaving him only to prepare for the 10 stars. Shortly after, Crew 2 sent a message confirming that all traces of the chimeras had been thoroughly erased. Pleased with the report, Berger concluded that the Akon Palace would never suspect Princess Lavinia was residing in his tower. To secure their position further, he called Lavinia over to begin plotting their next move. Meanwhile, inside the Akon kingdom, a message from Lavinia was delivered to the king in his throne room. The letter bluntly stated materials and ordered them not to look for her. During a subsequent meeting, an advisor questioned whether they should deploy another search party. The king declined, noting that previous efforts had failed to retrieve the 5th princess. Reasoning that she seemed content, he decided to leave her alone for the time being, adding that if she turned Urgist into a wasteland, he would personally take responsibility. With that, the advisors dropped the matter. Elsewhere, inside the Tower of Frost, Reyna conversed with Ugar, seeking clarification on how Berger had assisted him. Ugar explained that Berger discovered the hero's journey was approaching, warned him in advance, and provided highly useful information. Reyna questioned whether Berger was truly more trustworthy than Jason, pointing out that Jason had provided them with intelligence for a much longer period. Ugar acknowledged Jason's historical assistance in helping them survive within Urgist, yet admitted he harbored an unexplainable distrust toward him. Reyna offered to enlighten him. She reminded Ugar that while she, and Draxon had survived in Urgist for decades with Jason's aid, every new Demon King invariably fell to the hero's journey in less than 3 years. She specifically cited the Demon King of Lust, who fell to the hero Hillen. She noted that Jason could have saved those new Demon Kings had he truly wished to do so. Realizing the implications, Ugar questioned if Jason was the one who had killed Draxen, and asked what their next move should be. Reyna advised him that as a Demon King, he needed to think and judge for himself, confessing that she did not fully trust Berger either. When Ugar asked how they could identify the actual culprit who killed Draxen, Reyna stated there was a way to find out, even if it required consulting an unpleasant woman like Vivian. The scene shifted to the Buffet Palace, where Vivian was utilizing an invincibility ability to float above the terrain, undetected. Speaking with Reyna, Vivian confirmed the directive to kidnap the Dwarven Princess. Reyna explained that Draxen's death stemmed from incidents at the Dwarven Princess's mansion, and they suspected a Demon King had sent the princess to Ormuth. Since Vivian had arrived after Draxen's death, she was entirely clear of suspicion, making her the ideal candidate to uncover the truth impartially. Vivian praised her own suitability, but noted she had not yet heard the specific words she wanted from Reyna. Though annoyed at being teased, Reyna relented and explicitly begged her to carry out the mission. Vivian laughed, claiming she had not intended to force such a plea, and playfully accused Reyna of making her look like the villain before Reyna abruptly cut the communication line. Left alone in the Buffet Palace, Vivian resolved to demonstrate her skills. She was operating under the orders of Archduke Arcane to locate Draxen's killer, knowing that completing the assignment would allow Arcane to send her back. Arriving at the Dwarven Palace, she moved forward confidently, laughing at the thought that the passing knights were entirely oblivious to her presence. She reflected that her stealth had never failed, unless a top-tier hero was present. However, as she rounded the corner near the Dwarven Princess's room, she was shocked to find Hillen standing directly in front of her. Stunned and unable to move, she asked if he could see her. Hillen smiled, confirmed that he could, and drew his sword, declaring that she was finished. As he swung his weapon, Vivian narrowly blocked the strike with a massive shield. She screamed in frantic frustration, questioning why a top-tier hero capable of piercing her stealth was stationed there to guard a princess, openly cursing her misfortune in such a wretched dimension. Hillen maintained a relentless assault, leaving Vivian to bitterly question why she had been thrust into such a dire predicament. Hillen, conversely, was pleased to see events unfolding exactly as Berger had foretold. He recalled his earlier conversation with Berger, who had instructed him to guard the dwarf princess for the time being. Berger had warned him that a Demon King would undoubtedly attempt a kidnapping, promising that unwavering faith in his guidance would lead Hillen to greater heights. Recognizing this reality, Hillen shouted that he would defeat Vivian to secure his own achievements. He leaped into the air to strike, but the moment his blade descended, Vivian activated a skill to vanish from his sight. Propelling herself away from the danger, she screamed that she refused to be defeated in a place like this. She sped through the chamber, frantically searching for the princess. Suddenly, Louise intercepted her. Swinging a heavy axe, Louise asked Vivian if she was looking for her, projecting an ominous energy that deeply shocked the intruder. As Louise struck down, telling her to die, Vivian managed to block the impact with her shield. Aghast, Vivian wondered what kind of princess wielded such brutal power. Louise mockingly asked if Vivian had mistaken her for a prince instead. Hillen re-entered the fray, declaring this place to be the grave of the Demon King of Lust. Facing both a relentless hero and an axe-wielding princess, Vivian felt entirely cornered. Near tears over the absurdity of her circumstances, she unleashed a massive aura that pushed both opponents back. Protesting the annoyance of the situation, she utilized her abilities to flee once more. Hillen noted her sudden escape and swung his sword heavily, but she managed to fly out of the palace undetected. Frustrated by the escape, Louise berated Hillen for letting her get away, demanding that the guards pursue the Demon King immediately. Meanwhile, Hillen contacted Berger, reporting that the Demon King of Lust had arrived exactly as predicted. Sitting in his throne room, Berger reflected that he had anticipated this outcome from the moment he first met Vivian. When asked about the result, Hillen admitted he had failed to eliminate her, but had secured a trophy, the tail of the Demon King of Lust. Berger was visibly shocked by the nature of the prize, which Hillen promised to dispatch to the tower. The scene shifted to the Eastern Triangle Strait within the Sea of the Sea King. A massive, calamity-grade creature known as Crudolord ruled the terrain. Palav stood before the beast, laughing and taunting the monster to put up a better fight. As a hero of the 10 stars, Palav demanded that the creature attack, declaring that the battle was just beginning. Suddenly, a warning shout echoed as a massive fireball descended from the sky. Crudolord was incinerated in an instant. As the sea cleared, Rosal stood elegantly in the descending light, having completely destroyed the creature. Palav complained about the interruption, stating he had been right in the middle of his battle. Roselle ignored his grievance, informing him that an order had been issued to summon all of the 10 stars for a hero's journey to Urgist. Though Palav called the assignment a pain, the prospect of traveling to a den of calamity-grade monsters quickly excited him. Roselle told the battle maniac not to get his hopes up, pointing out that his habit of fighting with an ordinary sword and no mana made his prolonged battles look absurd. Palav proudly defended his methods, suggesting she try it herself, which earned him a swift dismissal. Noting her increased magical strength, Palav asked if she had been training alone and challenged her to a spar. Annoyed, Roselle told him to fight alone and die, using her magic to transport him as they moved to their next destination. When Palav asked how she had tracked his secret location, she revealed that the Guildmaster of the Heroes Guild had disclosed it. Upon arriving at the Heroes Guild, the Guildmaster commended Hillen for his outstanding recent achievements, noting that he had defeated 2 Demon Kings and protected the Princess of Berfet. In recognition of these deeds, the Guildmaster appointed him as an Argan. This elite position, shared only with the Guildmaster and the 4 Elders, granted immense political influence, to the point where even kings sought their favor. Hillen was ecstatic, reflecting on how far an ordinary boy from a small countryside village had come. Grasping his sword, he resolved to win even greater recognition, proudly declaring that he would fulfill his duties as an Argan and become history's greatest hero. Palav walked in alongside Roselle, mocking how quickly the greenhorn had become a big shot. Greeting Hillen, Palav clapped him on the shoulder, noted his victories over the 2 Demon Kings, and suggested they spar sometime. Hillen politely welcomed him. The Guildmaster then addressed the gathered heroes, stating that a grave mission required their presence. Palav warned the Guildmaster that the mission had better be worthwhile. Hillen attempted to reprimand Palav for his disrespect, but the Guildmaster assured them the task would be satisfactory. He explained that they were to intervene in the Jespine Empire's succession war and forcibly return the 7 heroes of the 10 stars currently employed there, making the 10-star level hero's journey their top priority. Palav became incredibly excited, eager for the opportunity to beat the other heroes into compliance. Roselle found his enthusiasm creepy, while the Guildmaster cautioned him not to break their targets beyond utility, as they were still needed for the journey ahead. Palav laughed, noting that toys were meant to be enjoyed for a long time. Conversely, Hillen was deeply unsettled by the sudden gathering of all the 10 stars. Realizing the hero's journey would begin earlier than anticipated, he worried that the Demon King might fall before he could secure his path to ultimate success. The narrative returned to Berger's tower, where Hillen provided a debrief of the guild's plans. Berger was startled to learn that the timeline for the hero's journey was being advanced. Hillen explained that the journey would commence immediately once the heroes in Jespin were retrieved. Though the Guildmaster had offered no explanation for the sudden shift, Berger found the timing suspiciously artificial, wondering if Jason had interfered. When asked how the guild planned to expedite the process, Hillen confirmed they intended to intervene in the Jespine Empire's succession war. Berger knew that succession wars were an ancient tradition of the Jespine imperial family, where princes and princesses competed with their lives for the throne. When the emperor assigned a troublesome task, the royals would hire mercenaries and heroes to execute it across 5 distinct stages, a process that typically lasted 6 months. Hillen confirmed that 7 of the 10 stars were currently hired as mercenaries in that conflict. He warned that if Palav interfered, the war could be forced to a conclusion within a few weeks, rapidly assembling the full force of the 10 stars. Recognizing that time was running out regardless of Jason's involvement, Berger resolved to act immediately. He instructed Logger to prepare for the next stage by constructing a golem. Logger was stunned by the request to build an ancient weapon. Berger, recalling his past encounters with such constructs in his previous life, noted that Magitech was essential for the process. He then requested Lavinia's involvement with the preparations. She hesitated, demanding to know why she should help, until Berger offered the tail of the succubus queen as a reward. Thrilled by the rare ingredient, she readily agreed. Turning to Ernan, Berger inquired about Elena's condition. Ernan reported that Elena's mana had almost completely drained, and basic magic instruction would begin the following day. Satisfied, Berger transformed into his phoenix form. He informed Gordon that he would personally participate in the Jespine Empire's succession war to buy them some necessary time, leaving the tower in Gordon's care as he swiftly departed.